In a regular school, a small piece of eraser is thrown at the protagonist, whose name is Daejun. The piece of eraser lands on his desk. At that moment, he looks back and his classmate apologizes for hitting him. His classmate says he meant to throw the eraser at the person sitting in front, but the boy notices that there is no one sitting in front of him. Then they start throwing more pieces of eraser while Daejun watches. His hair is already full of eraser bits. At that moment, he turns around, asking them to stop. His classmate gets very irritated. He walks up to his desk, insulting him and asking what he said. Out of fear, Daejun pretends to be clueless. He says that his classmate keeps throwing the eraser and he just wants it to stop. At that moment, his classmate punches him in the head, calling him an idiot, and grabs his hair tightly, asking if he is dumb, while Daejun just apologizes. Then his classmate gets ready to hit him again. He punches him again while asking if he should stop just because he was asked to. Meanwhile, the other classmates watch the scene without reacting. Suddenly, one of the classmates says the teacher is coming. The teacher then enters the room. Daejun feels relieved that the teacher has finally arrived. Then he and the bully look at the teacher. The teacher coughs and tells them to stop playing around. The bully smiles, complying with the teacher's request. Meanwhile, Daejun, bruised and hurt, cries over the injustice, wondering if this is a joke. Even so, they don't stop, and the bully passes a note to his classmate, asking him to pass it along. His classmate sticks the note on Daejun's back. The note says he is a dumb orphan, and they start laughing. At the same time, he is all bruised and thinking that he cannot tell anyone. Then the teacher asks what day it is, and since it's the 14th, he tells the students to read the text 14 times. The protagonist, on the other hand, is thinking about how adults don't care, and that there's no one to help him. He is completely alone. Sometime later, the bell rings. We see a boy walking, asking if anyone has a cigarette for him. The bully, wanting his attention, says he has one and invites him to smoke together. As the boy looks at Daejun, he grabs his shirt and asks what this is and if they're still in elementary school to act so childish. Then he reads the note that says, "Dumb orphan." He asks the bully who wrote that, and the bully responds that he did and that it's fun to beat him because he's a dumb orphan. The cool boy gets angry and crumples the note. Sweating nervously, the bully apologizes, saying he was talking about the other student. Before he could finish his sentence, the boy punches him hard in the face, making him spit out saliva. The bully then falls to the ground from the force of the punch. Immediately, the boy prepares to kick him. The kick is right in the pit of his stomach, and the bully starts feeling intense pain. Then he asks the bully if he's crazy and tells him to repeat what he said. He continues beating the bully while Daejun watches in shock at the situation. The boy asks if he thinks he's some kind of tough guy and warns him that if he sees this kind of thing again, he'll finish the jerk for good. He points to the student, Daejun, and asks what his name is, and so the bully responds, saying it's Kwon Daejun. The boy adds that they should never touch him again. At that exact moment, the protagonist is in shock. He thinks that after those words, no one bothered him anymore, and that the whole problem was that no one dealt with the situation, not even the teacher. At this school, the words of the bully, the Iljin, were very powerful, and no one went against him. Even though the Iljin was much stronger than him, this small bully was nothing compared to the real bullies at school. At home, Daejun looks at himself in the mirror and says he hates himself for always relying on other people. He looks sad, but soon composes himself and says he needs to become stronger. Time passes while the protagonist works hard. He does push-ups at home, reads books on self-defense and martial arts, runs on the street to build his endurance, and watches professional fights to learn how to defend himself. After a while, he realizes he's gaining a lot of weight, so he continues to push himself even harder. In addition to gaining more weight, he's also getting bigger, and he decides to keep training. Time keeps passing. Daejun is now quite strong and does push-ups while reading a martial arts book. After all this training, he goes to school, and everyone wonders if he's the same boy from before, asking what happened to him. A student tells his classmate not to get close to him because now he's a real bully. The protagonist walks, thinking about how much he has released his repressed energy and emotions, and now no one could ignore him. But despite his strength, things fell apart quickly. It's a beautiful day at a small neighborhood shop. We see Daejun looking very different, wearing glasses and with an unshaven beard. Then someone enters the shop. Daejun says welcome while adjusting his glasses, thinking that this is his life now. Sometime later, inside the president's office, this kid is staring down the school president, and even this kid gives in, faced with a real bully. A woman is presenting her project in a room. This project is called The Best in Command. Her plan is to infiltrate someone to take command of the group. That way, they'll be able to control the bullies. A man in the room questions whether the plan is about control and violence with even more violence. The president of the group says it sounds fun, and the man beside him is shocked. Then the president asks if there's someone capable of leading the group of bullies. Sometime later, we see the protagonist trying to read a book but unable to concentrate. He decides to give up on reading. A man working at the same place comments on how today's youth lacks passion, while Daejun thinks about quitting both his university entrance exams and his job. Elsewhere, a group of men is robbing a child. The boy says he needs to buy porridge for his mother, and the men mock him. At that moment, a man catches the bully's attention. He tells the bully to go buy a cigarette and leave the boy alone, and the bully agrees. A couple from the group also decides to leave. They arrive at the store where the protagonist works. His coworker gets scared and says he's going to the staff room. The man goes to the counter and asks for 2 packs of Mevius cigarettes. At that moment, Daejun thinks they must be high school students, so he asks for their ID. The bully gets a bit irritated and says he forgot it, but that you should just hand over the cigarettes because it's no big deal. But Daejun replies, saying that without an ID, there won't be any cigarettes. The girl asks if he's serious and calls him rude. Then the bully says that rude people like him die easily, and the girl agrees. The high school bully throws a bill and tells him to hurry up. Daejun looks at the money and thinks about how much of a jerk the guy is, but that he still needs an ID. The man puts 2 drinks on the counter. The girl looks a bit uncomfortable and asks why drink that now. Then the protagonist says, "Excuse me," but before he can finish his sentence, the bully, now very irritated, asks if he's deaf. The girl looks scared. At that moment, the bully grabs Daejun's collar, calling him an idiot, and stares at him, saying he's going to beat him up. His coworker says the bully stole his cigarette and asks Daejun if he wants him to call the police. The coworker looks at the situation Daejun is in and gets desperate. The man says there are other customers in the store and suggests they settle this outside. Daejun can't believe what his boss just said. Outside, the bully is holding him while asking why he's not acting like before. He stares at him and asks if he thinks he can handle this. Daejun tells him to let go and gives him 3 seconds to do so. The girl laughs at him, calling him crazy, but ignoring the laughter, he starts counting. The bully, now very irritated, asks if he's seriously counting and prepares to hit him. Then we see the bully's perspective, looking at Daejun with his hands in his pockets and the girl telling him to get up. He's in shock, not knowing what happened, and the girl says he took a beating and passed out. She looks at him, asking why he's still standing. The girl helps the bully up while he curses Daejun for hitting him while he was distracted. Then he whispers to the girl to call the others. She says she didn't hear him, and he shouts for her to call the others. She runs off. The battered bully says that Daejun is in trouble and asks if he knows who he's dealing with. At that moment, the protagonist has a threatening presence toward the bully. Placing his hand on the bully's shoulder, he asks his age. The scared kid asks why he wants to know that. Then Daejun squeezes his clavicle hard. Already on his knees, the bully says he's 17 years old. In a lot of pain, he begs him to let go. Then Daejun says he'll kill him for real if he catches him buying cigarettes again. At that moment, a group of teenagers arrives at the scene. They look at the situation and wonder if their friend is kneeling in front of the cashier. He looks at them, asking if they are his friends and if they're all coming. A big guy asks the protagonist who he is and where he came from, also asking if he's a high school student or an adult. This guy introduces himself as Oh Daehan from Maedon High School. He gets ready to fight. Being quicker, Daejun dodges and slaps Daehan in the face. The slap was so hard that a lot of saliva flies out of his mouth. Then Daehan falls to the ground. Shocked, the girl can't believe what she saw. Daejun says he doesn't have much time and tells them all to come at him at once. The teenagers from the group call him crazy. One of them insults him and gets ready to punch him. Daejun pulls his hand out of his pocket, punching the guy hard in the face. Another one comes at him as well, but the attack is easily dodged, and Daejun follows up with an elbow to the head, completely knocking the teenager out. Another tries to attack from behind, but the protagonist manages to turn around and dodge, finishing with a punch to the head after completing the spin. The earlier bully is on the ground trying to grab a bottle. He succeeds and says that now he's going to finish this. Daejun looks back at the reflection, hitting a punch to the bully's stomach, making him spit a lot due to the force of the punch. He falls hard to the ground. Facing one of the group members, Daejun says only he's left and asks if he's not going to fight. The guy stares at the protagonist and says someone that strong can only be Daejun, asking if he is Kwon Daejun, who went to the same school as them. The girl asks if this Daejun is the same one who is the leader of the ancient area, known as the Iron Fist, who conquered a messy area in just 1 week, saying it's better to take a bullet than to face him. But looking at him, she says he doesn't seem like that and wonders if the rumors are false. The guy bows, apologizing and says this will never happen again. Daejun grabs the bully's head and asks if he's not ashamed of causing trouble. At that moment, the protagonist catches the girl's attention, scaring her, and asks what they're going to do with those guys lying on the ground. The guy asks if he wants to take them to the hospital. Daejun responds, saying he's not talking about the hospital. One of the men lying on the ground gets slapped to get up. He asks what happened, and his friend says it doesn't matter, just get up quickly. We see everyone in specific positions, showing respect to him. But Daejun makes it clear that if any of them come to the store to cause trouble again, they're done for. He asks if everyone understands, and they reply yes, saying that they are all his juniors. Sometime later at the end of the day, Daejun is walking, thinking that he didn't get to study because of those idiots but enjoyed feeling like that again. He enters a classroom, and a woman asks him to talk, but the protagonist refuses. The woman then says she has a suggestion and hands him a card. It says Golden Dragon High School. Back in the meeting room, the president asks if the contract was made and if he accepted the offer. The woman then looks at him. Sometime later at the high school, Daejun is at the entrance, happy to finally be returning to school, commenting that he's starting high school at 20 years old. Daejun asks if the plan is to have one bully to fight against other bullies, The woman confirms and says she needs his skill for that to be possible. But in return, he questions why the woman thinks about these things instead of running the school. Then the woman says she did a background check on Daejun, and he gets curious. Getting closer to the protagonist, she tells him not to pretend to be arrogant, as they both know he can't refuse the offer, and then it's not the time to be proud. She asks if he doesn't think this is a good way to fix past mistakes. Daejun says okay and asks how he can start. Sometime later, he's already wearing his uniform walking down the hallways, catching people's attention. Meanwhile, a man tells the students to go to the classroom. In the classroom, a student is being carried by another, speaking with the class representative, Bang Hojong. Hojong then asks the student if he's heard about the newly transferred student. At that moment, the student dismisses his underling, saying he was a good mode of transport, and asks why he left the school and if it was because the girl pulled his pants down. The same girl tells him to be quiet. Hojong says maybe it's because too many things were asked of him and that he should just buy bread for them. Then the teacher arrives, telling them to go to their seats. With a cold expression, the protagonist enters the room and the teacher tells the students to sit down, saying that today they have a new student, and Daejun introduces himself. The girls are shocked by how handsome the new student is, and the boys also admire him. Yuri, one of the girls, is putting on makeup while a student asks Hojong if she liked the new student. Hojong, for his part, says he already feels sorry for the new student for how much he's going to beat him up. There's a vacant seat for Daejun to sit in. Waving to another student, the protagonist asks his name, and the boy replies that it's Minsu. Minsu says this class can be a little different, and the newcomer says he's going to put on his glasses to study. Standing up from his chair, Hojong says it's time to begin. Trying to be friendly, the boy asks Daejun the prescription of his glasses, and he replies that it's 1.5 in each eye. Then Minsu asks why he wears glasses while the bully is preparing for a hit. Striking the boy hard on the head, Hojong seems satisfied. Shocked, the new student questions how the hit came out of nowhere. Smiling menacingly, the bully tells the boy to go buy a sausage roll for him, and Minsu asks if he's talking to him. At that moment, Hojong says yes, and that his old friend used to buy bread for them, but wasn't very loyal. He also says that the newcomer just arrived and doesn't seem eager to work. Grabbing the boy by the face, the bully says that now he's responsible for getting the bread. Nervous about the situation, Minsu says that class has already started and asks if he can go during the break. From afar, another bully laughs at the situation. Being sarcastic, Hojong says he forgot about that and thanks the boy for stating the obvious. Very stressed, he tells the boy to close his eyes. Then several students close their eyes out of fear, and the protagonist can't believe how pathetic the situation is. With a punch to the head, the bully calls the boy an idiot, asking if he wants to die and telling him to buy his bread now. Seeing all of this, Daejun tells the boy to take his hand off his head. Flashing back to a few hours earlier, we see the newcomer reading the rules and asking if he has to follow all of them. The woman confirms, saying it's part of his secret project and that there can't be any slip-ups, commenting that the school is like a jungle where the strongest survive, and that in the animal kingdom, the strongest is the lion. She adds that this applies to a common lion, but the new student isn't an ordinary lion. Back in the present, Daejun is staring at the whole situation. Then the bully asks why he didn't close his eyes. While hitting the boy, he says he understands the new student just arrived, but it was the boy who used to sit in his seat who got the bread. Lifting the boy, Hojong suggests they go together since they're friends. The newcomer says only one of them needs to get the bread and questions if they really need him. Scared, the boy says that's true and apologizes. Laughing a lot, the bully questions if they're really organizing themselves into shifts. From afar, that other bully laughs too. With a threatening look, the bully tells the protagonist not to act brave and just go. At that moment, the newcomer stands up. Walking over to the bully, he asks for money. The bully asks if he doesn't have his wallet, while not understanding a thing. Grabbing the protagonist by the head, he says the protagonist must be crazy. Staring at the bully, Daejun tells him to use his own money. The bully jokes, asking if he doesn't have money to buy bread or if he doesn't have parents to give him money. Irritated, the protagonist tells him to take his hand off his head and shut up, making it clear that he started it. Then he punches the bully in the ribs, making him spit out saliva due to the strength of the punch. After that, Daejun punches the bully square in the face, leaving him completely stunned. While other students look on, confused and not understanding anything, the protagonist, standing over the bully, thinks that those rules don't matter, and that the ones who really run the school are those with the strongest fists. He lands another punch on the bully's face to finish him off, causing the bully to spit out even more saliva. One of the girls looks on in shock. The other students try to hold back their laughter at the bully. The other bully stands up, not believing what he just saw. Standing tall, the protagonist tells the other bully who messes with others to come over as well. Completely terrified, he says he won't and asks the protagonist to come to him instead. Daejun says that's fine and tells him to stay right there. Walking over to the other bully, the bully tries to kick the protagonist, but he dodges. He tries a punch, and the protagonist dodges again. He attempts another punch, but he misses that one too. After dodging, the protagonist delivers a punch to the bully's stomach. Crying from the intense pain, this bully also spits out saliva. Excited, the protagonist tells him to stay still. In fear and agony, the bully says he might die and that this is dangerous. Then both look behind them after hearing a curse. Furious and holding a wallet, Hojong, the bully, yells that he's going to kill the protagonist. Daejun compliments him, saying he's pretty strong. But even so, he punches the bully in the face again, telling him to be quiet. Sometime later in that same room, Hojong, the bully, is unconscious, while the protagonist looks over him and the other bully on the ground. Grabbing him by the hair, Daejun asks if the bread from the cafeteria is really that delicious, saying he's curious to find out how good that bread is and orders the bully to go buy one for him. With his face swollen, the bully says the protagonist is brave and asks if he thinks he's won just because he defeated them, saying that he's not the boss of this room. At that moment, someone enters the classroom. Hojong looks relieved that this person has arrived. It's Minho, the leader of the class, who asks who the protagonist is and if he's trying to take over the class. Daejun asks if he's the boss of this room. Walking toward them, the class leader asks how the two bullies lost to one person. Curious, the protagonist stares back with a blank expression. The class leader asks the protagonist why he's doing this on his first day. The bullies, scared, wonder if the leader will be able to win, and the girl from the group asks if they're okay. One of the students steps back, not wanting to get involved. Annoying, the class leader tells the students that he's not going to fight. At that moment, the protagonist looks at him suspiciously, wondering if he really isn't going to fight. Analyzing the leader's legs, he sees they're spread and pointed toward him. His shoulders are also ready to move. As the leader stares at him, the protagonist thinks that the leader is subtle but could attack at any moment. The earlier bully thinks the new kid is strong, but he won't defeat the class leader, Minho. So he asks one of the students for popcorn. The student wonders why him. Irritated, the bully asks if he's gone crazy. Then the bully leaves, saying they'll be having meat for lunch. The class leader then realizes that the room is no longer afraid of Hojong. Calmly, the leader says they should introduce themselves and says his name is Minho, asking for the protagonist's name. Daejun then says his name. At that moment, Minho lunges forward, moving his hand toward the protagonist's face to trick him, while preparing to kick him. Aiming directly at the protagonist's weak spots, he realizes that it's going to be a low blow straight between the legs, and that it's a hit with unbearable pain. It's a strike that can't escape criticism, as no man should use such a move. Sweating nervously, Daejun analyzes the situation, placing his hands over his vulnerable area. Noticing this, the leader switches his movement to a punch, saying it was a bluff. He charges in with a full-force punch at the protagonist, landing a solid punch to Daejun's face, strong enough to leave a mark. Excited, the bullies cheered, saying there's no way the new kid can win. Daejun thinks that the leader bluffed and attacked at the same time. He kicks the leader straight in the shin. The leader is surprised by the kick. After that, the protagonist grabs the leader by the collar, throwing him far away with great force. The leader hits the wall and sits down after being thrown. Giving a lesson, the protagonist says not to threaten others like that. Laughing, the class leader stands up, saying that if it's him who's going to get hit, then it's no problem. Surprised, one of the bullies says that Minho is the number one without manners, and Hojong corrects him, saying that if he cheats like this 3 times, he'll be expelled from kickboxing. Clenching his fists, the leader says that now he's going to use proper kickboxing, and this time it's going to be serious. Calmly, Daejun tells him to avoid that place. Minho then observes him while reaching for an object. At that moment, he throws a chair towards the protagonist. Daejun dodges it reflexively. As Minho charges towards the protagonist, he dodges his punch. With his right hand, Minho tries to hit him again, but Daejun dodges once more. Irritated, the leader tells him to stop dodging while preparing for another strike. Then he notices something, telling everyone to stay still because this opponent is his. Surprised, Daejun wonders if there was someone else there. Everyone looks at a student with glasses. That student asks if they were talking about him. Minho then approaches Daejun with a furious look, preparing to throw another punch. The protagonist blocks with his wrist and tells Minho that he's a fun guy, asking if he's done playing around. Minho responds, saying no, and tries to strike Daejun's neck with 2 fingers, but Daejun dodges again. Then the protagonist says that he'll finish this himself, landing a powerful punch straight to the leader's face, knocking him unconscious as he spits out saliva and falls face first to the floor. Daejun then asks who this guy is and says that he's no longer in the mood to fight. The bullies, shocked, can't believe what just happened. The other students are also stunned. Daejun kicks Minho, telling him to get up. He walks away, telling the bullies to take Minho to the infirmary, and that now they work for him. Completely in shock, the two agree but think they're in deep trouble. Meanwhile, in the teacher's office, that woman is observing a room, thinking that Daejun doesn't look like a transfer student, but now she has a long meeting to handle. She checks her phone, thinking about how excited she is to see what he'll do next. Walking down the hallway, she thinks it might be time to move on to the second part of the plan. A schoolgirl watches her, thinking that's the director of the Foundation's planning division. At that moment, her classmate arrives and tells Jiayan to go to class. But Jiayan is still pondering why the director is at the school. Back in the protagonist's classroom, Daejun is lecturing the bullies, saying that school is for learning and that it's time to stop this bullying nonsense. The 3 lower their heads, and the blonde one says they're not bullies, while Hojong tells them to stop because everyone's watching. With a menacing expression, Daejun gets close to the blonde bully and says he can either be his friend or his nightmare, and the blonde one quickly says they should be friends. Daejun glares at Hojong, calling him bread boy, and tells him not to eat any more bread, but Hojong asks why. Irritated, the protagonist just tells him not to eat any more bread, and Hojong obeys. Now facing the other students, Daejun says that if any of them bothers anyone in this room or harasses others, they should let him know. With a mischievous look, Daejun says he'll straighten them out. Surprised, one of the students thinks the protagonist is both scary and kind at the same time, wondering if things will now improve in the class. Sometime later in room 3 on the first floor, a student is watching a video of the fight between Daejun and Minho, saying this is entertainment. He shows the video to another student, asking what he thinks of the new guy, and the other student responds that he just got lucky and that he doesn't see any real skill. Then the student shows the video to someone else, saying Minho only learned kickboxing after getting beaten up by this other student. A student named Sambo then stands up, irritated, asking what's wrong with Minho, saying he only became the leader of that room by playing dirty. This student then goes to train and asks where his punching bag is. It turns out the punching bag is another student, who immediately responds with his location. This bully then says it's his turn today, and delivers a punch straight to the punching bag student's stomach, making him spit out saliva from the pain. Sangwoo then thinks about how many hits he's going to give and decides on 800. He's the class leader and tells the punching bag not to have eaten before coming. Totally confident, the bully tells them to prepare a few punching bags because he's going to warm up before going after the new kid. Sometime later at the high school, Daejun is in class, reflecting on how he ignored important lessons during his first time in high school, concluding that school is much better than studying alone, and that he needs to take this chance to fix his past. After a while, the teacher dismisses the class. Daejun asks Minsu if he can copy the notes during the break, and Minsu agrees, offering his own notes. Hojong stretches, saying he's hungry, and complains that he has no one to get him food, at which point Daejun glares at him. The two bullies are scared, and the blonde one tells Hojong to exercise, but Hojong is already using another student as a horse, asking the transport what his name is and saying he got on by accident. Hojong then wonders how he can survive school without a student to fetch his bread and says the kid wouldn't even be able to fight back. The group gathers around Minho, telling him to go outside because he doesn't look well, and a girl says it won't make any difference if they take him out. She calls the boys miserable. Then she approaches the protagonist, telling him he's amazing when he fights, and invites him to learn jiu-jitsu with her. The three boys are shocked by this, saying she's flirting with Daejun, and they remember when Hojong invited her to learn jiu-jitsu, but got cursed out. Daejun asks the girl if there's a dojo nearby. Excited, the girl says there is, but she can find another one if he prefers. The protagonist, confused, looks to the right, then turns and looks to the left while the girl asks what's wrong with him. She then realizes he's looking at the board, understanding that he wants to take notes from the board and wonders if she's interrupting. Scratching his head, Daejun says he didn't hear her and asks what she said. Very disappointed, she says it's nothing and tells him to study hard and become a great person. The three boys look at her with no reaction, and she tells them they're pathetic and should study too. At that moment, Minho realizes that the new kid became the class leader by defeating him, and because of that, he'll have to face Myungjong from Class 2 and Sangbo from Class 3, and he might lose his spot as leader of Class 1, even though he already beat both of them before. The girl then points out that Minho didn't beat them with skill. Minho concludes that if those two defeat Daejun, the room will be taken over by the other leaders. Hojong panics, saying those two are monsters. At that moment, someone enters the room. Minho is instantly on alert. It's Kim Myungjong, the leader of Class 2, and he asks Minho if he's okay because he got beaten up. The girl is surprised because they were just talking about the leaders, and the blonde boy says he feels like punching this leader. Kim asks if Minho didn't sleep last night or if he got knocked out by a punch and fell asleep. Irritated, Hojong stands up, asking if Kim came to mock Minho, and at that moment, Minho tells Hojong to stop. Minho then stands up and asks if Kim came to pick a fight, saying he can beat him again. Kim says Minho is full of himself and that he only lost because Minho fought dirty. Getting closer, Minho tells him to shut up or he'll lay hands on him, and Kim responds, telling him to go ahead. But before they can finish, someone yells for them to be quiet and both are surprised. Daejun says they talk too much and that he wants to study. Minho returns to his desk, telling everyone to study, and Hojong points out that it's still break time. Kim then realizes the one who yelled is the new kid. With a mocking tone, Kim looks at Hojong and Minho and says he won't deal with him because he's already as good as dead. Annoyed, Hojong says he hates them and would rather deal with a new kid, and Minho agrees. Walking over to Daejun's desk, Kim and his sidekick are curious. Confused, Kim asks if this is really the new kid, and his partner says yes, but he looks different from the video. Approaching the protagonist, Kim asks if he's some kind of criminal, and his sidekick jokes that he just looks like a nerd with those glasses. Kim gets right up to Daejun's face and asks him to repeat what he said earlier when yelled. With a serious look, Daejun analyzes the situation in silence. Very irritated, Kim tells him to repeat it and says earlier he was complaining about the noise, but now he's acting deaf. Looking at his partner, Kim says the new kid is so scared he's not saying anything and asks if he didn't think he was tough. Kim moves his hand closer to Daejun's desk and says that when someone speaks, he needs to listen. Out of pure reflex, the protagonist grabs Kim's hand firmly. Terrified, Kim begs him to calm down, and in great pain, he pleads for him to stop. The other students, scared, just watch the situation unfold. While squeezing Kim's hand, the protagonist says he needs to finish his notes and that Kim should come back later if he doesn't want to lose a hand. Sweating nervously, Kim says he understands. After letting go of his hand, the protagonist tells him to leave before he changes his mind. Kim walks over to his partner and says they should go. He repeats again for them to leave. Suddenly, Kim turns back toward the protagonist, ready to throw a punch, saying he doesn't care about the notes. Swiftly, Daejun grabs the arm of the leader from Class 2 and prepares to counterattack, delivering a palm strike to Kim's face. Kim immediately loses consciousness, falling to the ground as his partner checks his pulse and realizes he's still alive. Daejun then asks if Kim is the leader of Class 2 and says they're too impatient because he was planning to come after Kim soon anyway. With a sinister look, Daejun tells them to take him when he wakes up and warns that if they run into him again, it will be the end. As Kim's partner leaves, the students in the room are amazed by Daejun, and the protagonist thinks it was convenient to have defeated the leader of Class 2 by accident. The main group in the room is in shock at what happened. Frightened, Hojong says it's better to forget about revenge and that he's decided to forgive the new guy. The blonde boy then says that at this rate, they'll just end up being nerds who study diligently. At that moment, the leader of Class 3 arrives, calling for Minho, saying he heard some things. Shocked, Hojong asks if they've all lined up outside, and Minho says he'll have to get up again. Sangbo tells him to stay quiet because they didn't come for him. Hojong then asks why they came into the room if not to start a fight, and the blonde boy tells Hojong to calm down. The bullies from Class 3 surround the desks of Daejun and Minsu. Daejun, unsure of the situation, says he'll leave the notes for later. Sangbo grabs Minsu by the head and tells him to leave. Sitting in the chair, the bully asks Daejun if he's studying. One of the bully's companions looks at the protagonist and calls him handsome. Shim Sangbo says he's the leader of Class 3 and that he's here to see if Daejun thinks he's the boss just because he beat Minho. At that moment, the protagonist slams his hand on the desk. Irritated, he asks Sangbo to say what he wants quickly because he's being too loud. The bully says the protagonist is brave, but the protagonist asks how he could be brave just for talking to an idiot and concludes by saying the bully is pathetic. With a murderous glare, Sangbo says the protagonist is amusing. He stares at Daejun and says he'll see him after school, telling him he better be ready because he's not as weak as Minho. Leaving the room, the bully calls his companions to follow. Confused, the protagonist wonders why all the students are acting like this since day one and all he wanted was to study normally. The girl, analyzing the situation, says that Sangbo is very strong and that Daejun has gotten himself into a mess, but the blonde boy is shocked at her concern. She responds saying she just doesn't like Sangbo and prefers the new guy and asks the blonde boy if he wants Sangbo to be the new leader. Standing up from his desk, Minho replies that he doesn't. The blonde boy asks where he's going. Then the girl asks if he's going to talk to the new guy and if she can go with him. Arriving at the protagonist's desk, Minho asks if he can sit down and Daejun replies no. Ignoring the refusal, Minho sits down and says that Sangbo is very different from the students in Class 2 and that he's a real fighter. Adjusting his glasses, Daejun tells him not to worry. Surprisingly, Minho says he wants to help the protagonist. Hojong and the blonde boy are shocked. The girl is thrilled with the idea. Suspicious, the protagonist asks if he's really going to help him, wondering what Minho's scheme is, and Minho responds that he's going to tell him Sangbo's strategy. The protagonist refuses the idea, saying it's not necessary. Ignoring him again, Minho explains that Sangbo has been training in boxing since middle school, but doesn't care much for real boxing matches. Meanwhile, in Sangbo's classroom, he asks for the punching bags to be brought to him. When faced with only 3 students, Sangbo asks if there shouldn't be 4. One of the students says the 4th is in the hospital. Irritated, Sangbo asks if it's his fault, and the student replies that the 4th just collapsed somewhere. With an air of superiority, Sangbo says it couldn't be his fault because he's training these students, but he's not responsible for them being weak. Stretching, he tells the 3 they'll need to try harder and now they'll begin. The 3 students get into fighting positions but are very hesitant. With a hateful look, the bully tells them they can come at him. One of the students closes his eyes and charges forward to throw a punch. Quickly, Sangbo delivers an uppercut to the student's chin, making the student fall backward. One of the other students is terrified by this sight, but gathers courage and charges as well. Sangbo dodges his punch and counters with a direct hit to the ribs with his left arm, then finishes with a punch to the face using his right arm. The second student crashes to the floor, trembling with fear. The last remaining student looks at the scene. Sangbo tells him to come on already. This student is completely terrified, but still runs at the bully, only to take a punch directly to the face. With a flurry of punches, the bully tells the student to defend himself, telling him to move his arms while the rest of the class watches. One of the students, already beaten, is lying on the floor looking at the bully. Sangbo looks back at him and asks why he's sitting down, telling them all to get up and that he's hitting them lightly so it'll last longer. With a calm expression, the bully asks if they're faking to make it end faster and says they should try harder. Two of the beaten students are scared, and Saemo concludes by saying they'll now go visit their friend in the hospital. Sometime later at the high school, during the break in the cafeteria, the protagonist is with Minsu getting food. He sits at one of the tables with his plate, staring at the food and thinking it's been a long time since he ate school food, as he's only been eating stale stuff at work recently. He remembers what it was like working at his store and how his boss was considerate. Two girls are looking at the protagonist, and one of them comments on how handsome he is, saying he just arrived today. Her friend thinks about how Daejun just arrived today. At another table, several students are talking about how the new kid beat 2 leaders, and one of them questions whether he just arrived and already wants to be the leader. Another says the new kid did all that in one go. Then one of the students responds, saying maybe it was luck, and that he'll still have to face Sangbo. Gu Samhwa, the leader of the special sports class, says they'll soon find out if it was luck or skill. Back at the protagonist's table, the girl from his class approaches and asks why Daejun is eating alone, telling him they should all eat together. Minsu wonders if she didn't see him at the table to say that. The students from Class 1 are sitting together at the table, chatting amongst themselves. At another table, 2 students are talking about the protagonist, and one of them asks if the new kid has already joined Minha's gang. The other says the new kid is quite handsome. Kwak Du-shik, the leader of the special arts class, asks if he's not better looking than the new kid, and his friend says yes. At the Class 1 table, the protagonist is eating rice, and Minho tells him to eat everything, because Sangbo won't be as easy as Kim. Daejun, suspicious, says Minho claimed he could beat Sangbo, and asks why he's trying to help him. Minho says his fight with Sangbo is still ongoing. He then starts to remember his fight with Sangbo, completely beaten and exhausted. Sangbo asks if Minho is already tired, saying he won't stop until Minho's face is covered in blood. In response, Minho tries to hit him with a left hook, but Sangbo dodges it. Countering, Sangbo punches Minho in the face. Minho tries to strike again, this time with a right hook, but it's easily dodged. Sangbo counters with a left punch, landing squarely on Minho's ribs. After that, Minho pins Sangbo against the wall, resorting to his forbidden technique and going straight for the bully's weak spot. In shock, the protagonist asks if that's what he used before. Returning to the memory, the bully can't bear the pain and gives up. Minho recalls that even though he beat Sangbo, Sangbo never admitted it, and no one acknowledged his victory. Unable to believe it, the protagonist wonders if anyone would ever accept that kind of move. Concluding his thought, Minho says that Sangbo is skilled in both defense and offense, and even though he doesn't hit very hard, his precision is excellent. He adds that Sangbo didn't want to fight him anymore after that, and the blonde boy thinks it's because of the mysterious technique that Sangbo doesn't want to fight Minho again. With a serious tone, Minho says that the third-year bully is going to crush Daejun at this rate, and he hopes the protagonist can win. From a distance, the protagonist notices 2 students talking. He observes them and wonders who they are. In their conversation, one of the students asks if his friend is nervous about the new kid, and the other replies that he's not because Sangbo is going to win anyway. A piece of food falls onto Daejun's plate. The boy apologizes for it. Annoyed, the protagonist asks what's going on. Nervous, the girl asks if the boy has lost his mind to do something so childish. He says he already apologized and that she can eat it if she wants. Both leave, laughing at the situation. Quickly, the protagonist grabs one of them by the arm and asks where he's going. Furious, Daejun says that it's not fried squid, but a dish called dorachimmuchim. From another table, a girl with glasses wonders what's happening, thinking it looks like a fight is about to break out. Her friend comments that judging by the type of people at the table, the new kid must also be a bully, and the girl says he's really handsome. Other students also watch the situation, waiting to see what the protagonist will do. Daejun asks where the squid is. The bully, trembling with fear, says it's nothing and that the new kid should apologize. Squeezing the boy's arm even tighter, Daejun asks if he really needs to apologize. In pain and fear, the bully doesn't know what to do. Finally, the protagonist says that he's the one who decides whether he will apologize or not. At that moment, Daejun hears a notification sound. It's a message, and before reading it, he tells the bully not to move. The message is from the head of operations, Lee Same, wanting to talk with the protagonist. Seeing the message, the protagonist becomes a bit nervous. He remembers his meeting with Lee Same when she said she could secure a full scholarship for his college and offer him living support, reiterating the rules of the project, one of which is confidentiality, which is crucial. That's why Daejun's behavior has to be controlled so he doesn't get discovered, and if there's any chance of that, the project will be cancelled, forcing the protagonist back to his old life. Recalling all of this, the protagonist ponders what he should do with the bully. Meanwhile, the bully tells his friend they should leave, but the protagonist notices them trying to escape when he looks back. As he eats, the former bully Hojong comments that the problem isn't those two, but the fact that they're hanging out with the strongest guy in the school, Sangbo. Hojong asks why Minsu is staring at him, and Minsu replies that it's nothing. Confused, Daejun thinks he can't get caught up in the situation, and that he just needs the project to succeed to achieve his dreams. He also realizes he's done too much for his first day. 2 other students see that nothing came of it, and one comments that it seems the new kid doesn't fight over just anything, unlike the rumors said. Daejun says he's leaving and Minho tries to tell him Sangbo's strategy, but Daejun says he doesn't need it. The blonde boy comments that the protagonist seems to have changed a bit after checking his phone, and Minho says he's hard to predict. Outside the cafeteria, the protagonist is thinking about how much attention he's drawn on his first day and wonders what Lee Sain will think about it. While he's deep in thought, Daejun spots the bully from earlier. The bully tries to turn around and leave the situation, but the protagonist grabs him by the scruff of his neck, and the bully says Daejun is making a big mistake. He claims that since Daejun is new, he probably doesn't know, but there are rules in the school, one of which is that you can't mess with students from other classes, unless you defeat Sangbo. This is a school tradition passed down through generations, and if it's not followed, the protagonist could become a target. During their conversation, two people approach and Daejun tells them they should talk elsewhere. The bully says he doesn't want to, so the protagonist asks if he'd rather get beaten right there. The bully reluctantly agrees to go. They then head to another part of the school. Taking a punch to the stomach, the bully starts spitting saliva and screaming in pain. Falling to the ground, he says the new kid will regret this, but is ignored. The protagonist tells the bully to call his leader. He says that by the rules, if he defeats Sangbo, the bully will have no problem getting beaten, and the bully confirms that's true. The bully on the ground says now isn't the time because Sangbo is busy beating up punching bags. Daejun wonders if those punching bags are actually students. The bully confirms and asks if the protagonist has ever used that method in class. The protagonist says he won't let this slide. Later, in Classroom 3, thinking this must be Classroom 3, the protagonist is determined. He looks inside the room, getting startled as a student is thrown directly against the door. Curious, Sangbo asks who's behind the door. One of his companions says he'll check, then opens the door. Immediately, the protagonist tells him to move aside. Sangbo says he had already warned that he'd see the new kid after class. Analyzing the situation, the protagonist concludes that the bully only picks physically weak people to be his punching bags. Annoying, Sangbo asks what Daejun is doing in his classroom and tells the students lying on the floor to leave. One of the students is paralyzed with fear, trembling, and the bully says he's the only one left. Grabbing him by the neck, Sangbo asks if the student wants to cause problems for him, claiming he was injured. The bruised student only says that he fell on his way home and that it was his own fault. Laughing at the situation, the bully says they're all weak. Irritated, the protagonist looks to the side. Seeing all the students in the room silent, he realizes why no one does anything. He tells himself that he understands all of this from personal experience, remembering when he was beaten up at school and how the bullies wouldn't stop for anything. Since the adults pretended not to see, there was nothing to be done. But then someone showed up to solve that problem. A student even stronger than the bully who used to beat him, saying that anyone who messed with Daejun would be dead. Seeing all of that, the protagonist felt saved, and it became the greatest certainty he ever had. Only a stronger bully could stop another bully, and now at this very moment, Daejun would be that person. Concluding that everyone needs to know this, he aspires to become the bully who will rise to the top, commanding all the others. Motivated by this, the protagonist tells Sangbo not to pretend to be so strong since he only beats up weak people and says he should fight someone stronger. Sangbo asks if that stronger person would be the new kid. Daejun responds by asking if he can use Sangbo's companion as a punching bag. Completely irritated, the companion demands to know what he's talking about. Very confidently, the protagonist claims that the companion would make a good punching bag because he's heavy and looks fun to hit. The companion charges at him, but Daejun quickly blocks the attack with his left hand and grabs the bully with his right. He feigns a punch to his collarbone, but it was only a bluff, catching the bully off guard and finishing with a right uppercut, knocking the bully out cold on the floor. The students are in shock at the scene. With his hands in his pockets, the protagonist confirms that he really is fun to hit and asks Sangbo what he wants. Completely irritated, Sangbo listens as the protagonist asks how many punches he wants to take. At that moment, Sangbo is impressed that the protagonist was able to throw his companion into the lockers with just a punch, and considering the companion's size and weight, it means the new kid isn't ordinary. Sangbo then asks if the new kid only knows how to provoke, and orders the students to push the desks forward. They begin to push the desks. Meanwhile, the protagonist analyzes the decision, realizing that it was probably made because Sangbo is a boxer, and he needs as much space as possible for the fight. Outside the cafeteria, the bully from earlier is in pain, asking for help. His friend helps him, saying they should go to Classroom 3 because Sangbo and the new kid are going to fight. Hearing this, the other students decide to go too. Inside the cafeteria, Hojong wonders why the ice creams are so small these days, and the blonde responds, saying it's because he's gotten so big. Suddenly, they hear a student yelling that Sangbo and the new kid are fighting in Classroom 3. They decide to go as well. Arriving at Classroom 3, the three students from Class 1 wonder if the fight wasn't supposed to be after school. They realize the fight is about to begin and joke that they should have bought popcorn. Analyzing the situation, the protagonist thinks that even though Sangbo beat Minho, it didn't seem like he had much skill based on the video we saw. Meanwhile, Sangbo is warming up, getting into position to go all out. He charges at the protagonist with incredible speed, throwing a left punch, but Daejun reflexively dodges it. Sangbo then changes direction, attempting a right punch, which is also dodged. As he dodges, the protagonist thinks Sangbo is faster than a professional boxer, and every time he gets close, Sangbo quickly pulls back. He continues following the protagonist to stay close. Sangbo tries another right punch, but the protagonist ducks to avoid it. Seeing an opening after Sangbo's attack, Sangbo notices that Daejun is going to try a cross punch, so he instantly jumps back to dodge it, acknowledging that the new kid can spot an opening but thinking it won't work anyway. The protagonist realizes that Sangbo can read his shoulder movements and that he's not an ordinary guy. He has natural instincts, systematic training, and is good at using his feet. Not to mention he's fast, moving swiftly towards the protagonist, throwing a series of punches, but Daejun dodges them all. Watching the fight, Minho recalls how he was also trapped by those punches and can't see any opportunity to counterattack, wondering what Daejun will do. The protagonist finds an opening, leaving Sangbo shocked because he can't avoid it. Daejun lands a right cross, hitting Sangbo's upper arm. Despite blocking the punch, the impact pushes Sangbo back, making him wonder if that punch came from a normal guy, since even though he blocked it, he still took damage. Hojong and the blonde are surprised by the counterattack. Daejun thinks that Sangbo has abnormal speed, and that his ability to assess situations is also fast. The bully realizes that he's now figured out the protagonist's reach from that punch. Sangbo formulates a strategy to feint a punch and then land a cross, knowing the protagonist will step back and try to punch first. The protagonist notices something in Sangbo's movements. Quickly, Sangbo gains momentum and rushes toward the protagonist at full speed. Daejun braces himself, and Sangbo knows his time. Dodging Daejun's first punch, Sangbo is pleased that his read was correct. At the same time, the protagonist is preparing to kick, landing a blow to Sangbo's lower thigh, causing him pain and disbelief at the possibility of a kick. He quickly loses control and tries to throw a left punch, but Daejun dodges it. After dodging, the protagonist assesses his next move, landing another powerful kick to Sangbo's leg. The other students comment that Sangbo was so focused on punching that he completely forgot about the kicks, and now his movement will be impaired. Looking down at him, the new kid tells the bully to get up. Standing up, irritated, Sangbo curses and says Daejun should have some manners. Ignoring him, Daejun kicks him again in the same spot, telling him to hurry up and stand. Surprised, the students are in shock, and Minho comments that Daejun should have kicked him in the face. With a piercing gaze, the protagonist asks if Sangbo's leg is hurting, and that if it is, he should just lie down. Trembling and angry, the bully tells him not to act like he's already won the fight. Once again, the protagonist prepares for a kick and thanks him for the compliment. At that moment, Sangbo braces himself to defend the area already hit by 3 consecutive kicks. But the protagonist plants his foot firmly on the ground, delivering a punch with his right hand, revealing that the kick was a feint. Sangbo barely manages to block with his left arm. He realizes another punch is coming, but the protagonist stops his hand, showing it was another feint, and sweeps Sangbo off his feet, leaving the entire class in shock. His classmates, stunned, realize that it's Minho's technique. Other students remark that Sangbo took 4 kicks to the same leg and wonder if he'll even be able to move. Sangbo is kneeling on the ground, unable to move. In the ceiling of the room, there's a camera, recording the whole fight, which is being projected in another room, where a man watches, appreciating the fight, noting that these kids really know how to brawl. Confident, the protagonist asks what Sangbo is doing and tells him to get up and face him. Irritated and clutching his leg, Sangbo analyzes what to do next, knowing that his leg is no longer in any condition to fight. The students watch the fight, completely perplexed. Sangbo feels utterly humiliated. One of the students says he should get up if he's a boxer, while another asks if he can still fight at this point, saying that although they can't see it because of his pants, it's obvious that the bully's leg is completely messed up. Feet are a big issue in boxing. Even though fighters fear punches, they avoid blows by controlling distance, which allows them to throw multiple punches using footwork. Making an analogy, he says that if a punch is a bullet, then the feet are the gun that fires those bullets. So the better the gun, the better the shot. It's as if Sangbo had an AK-47, but without his leg to execute the punches. Meanwhile, the bully's leg is trembling in pain, but even so he prepares himself, saying it's not over yet. Annoyed by his persistence, the protagonist stares at the bully and asks if he wants to keep getting beaten. Quickly, the protagonist throws a punch with all of his strength at the bully's torso, which he blocks with his arms, but the force still throws him backward. Frustrated, Sangbo thinks about how painful it is even while blocking the punches, and that he can't use his legs to dodge. At that moment, Daejun lands another kick, which Sangbo blocks again, feeling a lot of pain after the block. The other students continue analyzing the fight, saying it's only a matter of time before the protagonist breaks through the bully's defense. After blocking, Sangbo's back hits something, and looking behind him, he realizes it's a wall. The protagonist moves in again, and Sangbo thinks he needs to get away from the wall at all costs. He barely manages to dodge the protagonist's punch. He tries to counterattack, but the protagonist dodges, then lands a direct punch to Sangbo's ribs. Sangbo realizes something is wrong with his breathing. Daejun follows up with a left punch, which is blocked, and then a right punch, also blocked. At this point, Sangbo is in a lot of pain. Minho comments that the fight isn't over since Sangbo is cornered against the wall. He's taking punch after punch, and now he only has the choice to either defend or get beaten. The blonde boy asks if this is a massacre because Sangbo is getting hit so much. Hojong says he looks like a punching bag. In a flashback, Sangbo is shown training in boxing. Other people at the gym are impressed by his skill, saying he should compete in a fight. The coach, however, says that Sangbo doesn't want to participate in a league or anything like that. At that moment, a teenager arrives claiming to be Sangbo's friend, calling him to leave. After the training session, Sangbo shows a tattoo he plans to get. As he says goodbye to the coach tries to talk to him, asking with a concerned look if Sangbo enjoys messing with others, telling him to only fight in the ring because that's the most important thing in boxing. Sometime later in the classroom, Sangbo is beating up a physically weaker student, even punching him in the face without holding back. With a terrifying look, he says this is much better than a simple punching bag, calling for the next student to fight him. A line of students forms ready to be Sangbo's punching bags. Sangbo's friend says that this one can take the hits so Sangbo can punch as hard as he wants. While beating another student, Sangbo's friend comments on how painful it must be. Back in the present, the protagonist is pummeling Sangbo while his friend watches everything, throwing punch after punch, turning the bully into a new punching bag. Sangbo is spitting from the force of the punches he's taking. In shock, Sangbo's friend wonders how he became a punching bag, and to his eyes it seems like the protagonist is hitting a literal punching bag. Daejun lands a left punch, followed by a powerful kick, making the punching bag swing back and forth. But in reality, it's Sangbo, enduring all of this like a human punching bag for the protagonist. After a powerful right punch, the chain in the punching bag breaks, symbolizing the defeat of Sangbo. He's unconscious from the blow, falling hard to the ground like a punching bag that's been wrecked, completely exhausted, knowing he has no chance of winning and will never succeed. Sangbo watches as the protagonist walks slowly toward him. With a terrifying look, Daejun tells him he has 10 seconds to get back up as the punching bag, leaving the bully utterly terrified. In classroom 3, Sangbo is exhausted and confused about what just happened, while the protagonist stares at him with a frightening gaze. The bully looks away in shame for having lost. Seeing the outcome, the students in his class can't believe it. The others who were beaten are also left speechless by the result. Sangbo's friend, scared, understands why Sangbo doesn't participate in boxing competitions. In the past, he asked Sangbo why, and he responded by saying it was annoying. His friend also knows why the bully chose not to go after Minho even though he claimed he would win, and why he's so obsessed with turning physically weaker students into his punching bags. The reason for all of this is that Sangbo wants to appear stronger than everyone outside of school, but deep down he's also afraid of getting hurt. Intervening in the fight, Sangbo's friend says that's enough and that they admit defeat. The protagonist stops the fight. Looking at the bully, he says he wants to hear it from his mouth. Full of shame and biting his lip, Sangbo admits that he lost. The students are shocked that the bully who oppresses everyone is being humiliated like this. As he walks away, the protagonist mocks the bully, saying he's not even good enough to be a punching bag, let alone a boxer. Impressed, the students say the new kid is really strong. Meanwhile, a student asks his classmate if they're no longer going to be punching bags, and the classmate replies that he doesn't know, but the new kid would just be another bully if that happened. Hojong is in shock while Minho wonders just how strong Daejun really is. One of the students asks his leader what he thinks of the new kid, and the leader replies that he's strong, but that they still don't know his true abilities, so they need to observe him more. As the protagonist leaves, he's stopped by a student. The student asks if Daejun was scared when he saw Sangbo, and ran away. After hearing a shout, the student becomes scared, wondering if that's Sangbo's voice. Heading to the classroom entrance, he realizes that Sangbo lost. At that moment, the new kid asks if he has anything else to say. The student replies no and says he's leaving. He bumps into someone at the entrance. It's Minho, who, along with his two friends, tells the student to move aside. The student quickly complies. Annoyed, he thinks that Minho is just taking advantage of the new kid's strength. The student goes over to Sangbo, who's lying on the floor, and asks if he wants to be taken to the infirmary. Frustrated, Sangbo just stares at the student in response. Scared, the student realizes how angry Sangbo is and tells the other students to leave the room. Almost exploding with rage, Sangbo says that things will never end like this. Later, in the meeting room, the fight is being shown on a projector. One of the project members comments that Daejun is a very focused individual. Lee is present at the meeting. Talking to Lee, the man says her ideas touched his heart, and because of that, he's able to work on this project, adding that the rules are outdated and need to be eliminated. Irritated, Lee shouts at him, reminding him of what happened in the past, and that without these rules, things would spiral out of control. The president asks why she's been so loud these past few days. Sam Lee then falls silent. He tells her not to worry so much, saying they can place Daejun in the school and asking what kind of power a man with nothing has. Making an analogy, he says the new kid is just a cat chasing mice that are hard to catch. But on the other hand, the cat is in their hands. Back at the high school, the news of Sangbo's defeat is already spreading. Now in class 4, a student slams the desk. It's the leader of Class 4, Park Dojin, celebrating. He's demanding money from another student as a sort of payment, while his friend asks what he's going to do. Park says he doesn't care. Now in Class 9, a student is adjusting his glasses. It's Lee Sung-hoon, the leader of the exam prep class. Moving on to Class 6, we see Yoo Ji-seok, the leader of Class 5. He says he can't believe Minho is eating with the leader of Class 3, Daejun, but that he could remove him whenever he wants. At that moment, Yoo tells a student that he'll be eating in Class 6, and the student says he doesn't mind. Yoo says he feels that the new student is different and that they should plan something to be prepared. Then the self-proclaimed queen of Class 6, Bak Suzy, says she's tired of men who want to play the boss. She says that if they get caught, she'll snitch to her appa, but Yoo responds that she can't bring a third-year leader to fight a first-year student. Concluding, Yoo says that either way, they need to think about it. Sometime later in front of the school, Daejun asks Hojong and the blonde why they're following him, and Hojong says that they're family now. Minho tells the protagonist that until now, the leaders have been cautious with one another, but soon they will make their moves. He adds that even if the protagonist doesn't want to fight, he needs to be prepared because it won't be easy. Hojong interrupts, saying they'll think about that when the time comes, but for now, they should go to the internet cafe since he just hit silver rank in LoL, and he invites Daejun to join them. Looking at a car, Daejun realizes it's the director's car. He apologizes and says he has an appointment, but even if he didn't, he wouldn't go with them because he doesn't play with silver and gold ranks. Hojong jokes that they'll need to get revenge on Daejun. Ji-ina is walking along the sidewalk leaving school. Her friend asks what's wrong. Ji-ina, completely shocked, is sure that the car Daejun just got into belongs to the director, and she wonders why he's getting into that car, thinking the director might be planning something again. Inside the director's car, Sam Lee, she comments to the protagonist that he's already stirred up a lot of trouble on his first day, turning serious after saying that. The protagonist argues that it was self-defense because other people picked a fight with him for no reason. Stanley stays silent after the protagonist's response. He realizes arguing is pointless and asks what his punishment will be. Stanley replies that there won't be any punishment and that he did a good job today. Furthermore, she says that things are changing and in the future, they plan to relax the expulsion rules. Curious, Daejun asks what that means, and Sam Lee explains that it means every day will be like today. Recalling the fights, the protagonist asks if they'll really be like that. Excited, he says he won't have to be patient anymore, and Sam Lee asks if he was ever patient to begin with. Realizing something, the protagonist asks how she knew about what happened today and wonders if she was watching him. Adjusting her glasses, Sam Lee simply replies that it's confidential information. Confused, Daejun wonders how they managed to monitor him inside the school and suspects that Minsu might be a spy, but quickly dismisses it as ridiculous, thinking it must be some rumors circulating around the school. They arrive in front of a building. Sam Lee opens the door, telling him this is where he'll be staying, and Daejun asks if she's serious. Already comfortable, Daejun says it's amazing to live in a place with a couch, and even though he's a secret agent, he's being treated very well. Suspicious, he says it feels like someone has already lived there. Sam Lee responds, saying she used to live in that house before. Embarrassed, the protagonist yells, asking if they're going to live in the same house, saying that doesn't make sense. With a fierce look, Sam Lee asks what he's talking about, and he quickly backtracks, saying it's nothing. Embarrassed, the protagonist says it's fine. She says that the school administration was pleased with his performance on the first day, and because of that, they've loosened the rules a bit and will trust his judgment. However, she warns that violence outside the school isn't under the administration's control, just like violence inside the school isn't, since the teachers aren't aware of this project. She concludes by saying the administration will provide him with support, but cautions him not to overdo it. Handing him a card, Sam Lee tells him to use it for his daily expenses, and that he can live alone in this house. After that, Sam Lee says goodbye and wishes him luck on the next day. Ignoring her, the protagonist simply says goodbye, thinking he'll just do what he's been told. Sam Lee begins to walk away, going down the stairs of the building until she reaches a large, heavy door, where she uses her fingerprint to enter. It's a monitoring room with multiple screens. At that moment, the protagonist is resting on the couch in his new place, while Sam Lee sits down and starts working in the monitoring room. Sometime later, back at the school, the protagonist is thinking about how, until now, he had been sleeping on a hard floor and that he is very tired. Then he wakes up and remembers that he's talking to his teacher. Annoyed, his teacher comments that the student is closing his eyes while he's speaking. He says that Daejun has been beating up students since his first day and that he'll have to talk to his relatives. But then he remembers that Daejun has no relatives. Frustrated, the protagonist just listens as the teacher scolds him. While the protagonist listens to the teacher's lecture, the student Ji-ina watches the situation closely. She stares intently at their conversation. In another conversation, one of the teachers tells Ji that she's the best student in the school and asks if she's also the class leader. Ji confirms, and the teacher tells her to go to her classroom. Smiling, she says it's fine. As she heads to her class, Ji notices the conversation between Daejun and his teacher. From what she hears, the new student got into a fight right after transferring. She wonders if that's the only thing he's been doing since arriving at the school. A while later, in class 6, he was taking pictures of Baek and asks why she's covering her face. She replies that he should just take pictures of her body. Someone calls you from behind. Two students ask if he's heard what happened to Sangbo. He says he has, but he hasn't been able to talk to him yet and tells the two to leave Sangbo alone. They then ask what he's going to do about the transfer student Daejun, saying that Sangbo was like that, and all the first-year students ended up becoming like him too. Before they could finish speaking, someone interrupts. It's Kim Yeonjun, the leader of Class 6. Panicking, the student says he never said that Kim or Ji Seok would lose the fight. The Class 6 leader then calls the student over to his desk. Sweating, the student says he's not claiming the class will lose and that they might end up fighting. At that moment, Kim punches the student in the face, causing him to bleed and struggle to process what just happened. Kim calls him over again. Afraid, the student approaches. This time, he receives an even harder punch straight to the face. Now completely beaten, he can't keep both eyes open. Calmly, the class leader tells him to watch what he says. Terrified, the student apologizes. Playing on his phone, Kim calls them idiots and tells them to leave. The students quickly obey his order and leave. Outside the classroom, the beaten student says he just wants to get out of this hell, and his friend asks if the best option is to transfer schools. Watching from a distance, one of the leaders comments that Kim has great charisma. The Class 6 leader responds, saying he just wanted to beat up those two idiots. Jiseok says they can't ignore what was said and asks if they should move slowly. Kim asks if he knows that automatic combat is the new trend in today's games. Crossing his arms, the student replies that he knows and that he doesn't play any games without that option. While playing, Kim explains that the reason it's so popular is because they don't have to use their hands. On a sunny day at school, the protagonist adjusts his glasses while glancing sideways, wondering why his classmate is wearing his glasses from one day to the next. Suspicious, he asks his classmate if there's a camera in his glasses. Confused, Minsu asks what he means by that. Daejun brushes it off, saying to forget it and asking why he's suddenly wearing glasses. Minsu replies that he used to wear them a lot. Distracted, his classmate looks at another student who resembles a character named Koob from a manga. Hojong is talking to this student, telling him to go to the cafeteria. Taking him off his glasses, the student says he was also afraid of getting beaten up and started wearing glasses since then, but tells the protagonist he doesn't need to do that anymore because he's there, and without paying attention, he calls Hojong a jerk. Surprised while eating his bread, Hojong wonders what he did wrong. Sweating nervously, he asks the blonde if he wants to play something, but the blonde refuses. Frustrated, Hojong stands up and tells him not to eat any more bread. Bowing as low as his body allows, Hojong apologizes and the blonde wonders what's wrong with him, asking if the bread is poisoned. The nerd who used to get beaten up adjusts his glasses at that moment. Daejun looks at him, both nervous and confused, saying that he adjusted his glasses in a very suspicious way. The student replies that he hasn't worn glasses in a long time. Embarrassed, the new kid says he's been a bit sensitive these days, and in his thoughts, he admits he's starting to suspect someone is watching him. Outside the classroom, another student appears. Looking from the outside, he sees Daejun studying and wonders if it's really him. The girl outside the classroom also notices that the new kid is in there. Both end up thinking he's more normal than they imagined. Walking down the hallway while watching the classroom, the girl accidentally bumps into the student. He immediately gets irritated and tells her to get lost. Scared, she quickly leaves, thinking he must be some kind of gangster to act like that. When he turns toward the window, he sees Daejun staring at him. Turning back to continue walking, he wonders how long he's been watched. Now in classroom 9, the girl with glasses mentions that she heard her friend pass by classroom 1 earlier, and that most of the girls go there to see the new kid because he's handsome, but she thought her friend only liked studying and didn't care about those things. Embarrassed and annoyed, her friend starts to think of a response, but her classmate eases the tension, saying it's okay, and that he really is good looking. She agrees and thinks there's a reason to keep an eye on the new student. Sometime later, the day is ending and the sun is setting. Watching the protagonist, the girl knows his name is Kwon Daejun, and that he transferred from Incheon according to what Era told her. Era also mentioned that she knows his address and passed by the food alley while heading to school, saying he has an irresistible charm. Her friend is shocked and left speechless. Hiding behind a pillar, she watches him closely. Feeling like a complete stalker for doing this, she notices that he's walking home from school without the director. As she wonders about their relationship and why he transferred, other students are gathering nearby. The student who was watching Daejun earlier asks the leader of Class 6 if they really have to do a task without reason. Kim confirms, saying they just need to do what he ordered and that the 4 of them can take him down. One of the students says he doesn't mind helping, but Minho is hanging out with Pam, and they aren't even leaders to be attacking the leader of Class 1-3. Irritated, Kim asks what the problem is and questions if they can't show their full potential in Class 6 because of him and Jiseok, adding that if he were in another class, he would have beaten half the students by now. He questions if the student cares about the rules the class leaders share, stating that he and Jiseok will soon dominate all the freshmen anyway, concluding that it'll take care of things and they should just finish the job. He tells them to call them when it's done. After Kim leaves, one of his friends comments that he's amazing and seemed like just a regular student when they saw him in Class 6, and another student says they should take this chance to boost their status. From a distance, they see the protagonist approaching. As he drinks his iced tea, he notices the new kid walking toward them. He throws his cup on the ground and says they should follow him. Suspicious, Daejeon seems to notice he's being followed. He turns a corner, continuing to walk forward as if nothing is happening while the group follows him. He keeps walking normally down the street. The stalker girl is scared, wondering what's going on and why this group is following the new kid. She leaves her hiding spot to see what's happening. The student from before notices her movements, looks at the girl who bumped into him earlier, and asks what she's doing. The girl pretends to be on a phone call. Suspicious, the student tells his friend to go ahead and says he'll catch up with him later. Confronting the girl, he tells her she's been following him for a while, but she denies it, saying she's just walking in the same direction. He remembers the bump from earlier, and once again questions why she's following him. Suddenly, he has an epiphany and claims she must like him. Complimenting her, he says she's cute and asks again why she's following him, then asks if she wants to come see him work, leaving her confused about what he means. Confidently, the student puts his arm around the stalker girl, saying he's going to rent a room and have fun with her, asking if she wants to join him. At that moment, the girl pushes him away, telling him to get his hands off her. Completely irritated, he curses at her, insisting that she followed him because she likes him as he advances toward her. His friends hear the commotion and wonder what's happening. This draws Daejeon's attention, and he realizes the group has stopped following him. With his hands over his eyes, the student asks what she did. Holding pepper spray, she says no one told him to put his dirty hands on her. The group arrives, and the student says the girl is crazy and sprayed pepper spray directly into his eyes. One of the students tells her to put it down before he hits her. Scared, she insists that he started it. The same student says he's not afraid to hit girls, and she threatens to use the spray again if they come any closer. From a distance, the protagonist asks what they're doing as he watches them. Crying, the girl is surprised to see the new kid. Annoyed, the bully tells him to leave. Meanwhile, the injured student tries to open his eyes to see what's happening. The bully says that Kwon Daejeon is here, and his friend says it was him who attracted this crazy guy. The protagonist then asks if they've been following him for a while, and they deny it. Pointing in another direction, Daejeon says he has something to take care of and invites the bullies to join him. One of them quickly accepts the invitation. Still shaken, the girl wonders if he did all this just to save her. After a while, they arrive in an alley. The bullies notice two people there, and they realize they're from Bonjin High School. This is a young man of first year from Bonjin Technical High School. And this is Cho Jinwoo from the same class, who says it's been a while since he's seen any girls from Juryong School. Aijun says they're a bunch of nerds and tells them to get lost. One of the bullies asks if he knows Kim Myeonjun and says they need to do what they were told. Both students confirm they know Kim, while Daejeon calmly watches the situation unfold. The student from the technical school says he'll let it slide this time, but if they're using Kim's name in vain, they'll pay for it. Frustrated, the bully thinks about his bad luck and wonders why they ended up meeting like this. Something catches Cho Jinwoo's attention. He asks if that girl works with them, and the bully responds that she doesn't. Daejeon, suspicious, continues to watch them closely. Sometime later, in a regular commercial building, Jiseok asks what Kim is doing there since he was supposed to handle the new kid, and Kim replies that he sent Yang Jinmo and other students to take care of it. Skeptical, Jiseok questions whether Yang can handle the situation, but Kim says he's strong, adding that even if he weren't strong, he wouldn't have made it to school after the second-year students got to him, and that even though they're second years, they fight on par with the third years, knowing not to mess with them. Meanwhile, the group of bullies corners the protagonist in the alley. Nervously, the girl asks if she can leave now. The bully tells her to be quiet and just watch. Curious, the new kid wonders why she's been following him since school and what he should do about it. He tells the bullies to let the girl leave, and the bully asks who he thinks he is. Taking off his jacket, the bully asks if the protagonist knows the situation he's in, questioning if he realizes he's here to get beaten up. The protagonist responds that he wasn't aware of that. Trying to figure out what's happening, the transfer student recalls that they mentioned Kim Myeonjun earlier, and if they keep sending people after him, he's going to end up getting hurt. Smoking a cigarette, the bully steps closer, and Daejeon warns that if he blows smoke in his face, he'll be a dead man. As the bully prepares to blow the smoke, the new kid tells him not to do it, just act tough. Grabbing the bully by the mouth forcefully, he begins pushing him back, surprising everyone around him. He then sweeps the bully's legs out from under him and prepares to strike. On the ground, the bully realizes something is coming. Daejeon lands a powerful punch to the bully's face, making him spit from the impact of the punch. The girl is left speechless. The group of bullies is in shock, saying he's really strong. Standing up, Daejeon says the bully didn't listen to him and comments that they'll soon end up like their friend. One of the students says that if they don't take down the new kid, Kim will punish them, and his friend says he doesn't know anything, but thinks they should all attack at once. They all charge forward together. Near the protagonist, the three hesitate, saying one of them should go first. With a disdainful look, the new kid asks if he should attack first. He positions himself to attack all at once. Faking a move toward one student, he punches another student in the face. One of the bullies curses and rushes at him, but Daejeon easily dodges the attack and goes after another student, who is completely terrified by this. He lands a powerful punch right in the middle of the student's face, knocking him out cold on the spot. The remaining bully is worried and asks if he can still fight, saying they should attack together now. Before they can move, the protagonist delivers a direct kick to his chest, slamming him into the fence. From a distance, one of the bullies curses at the new kid, getting ready to throw a punch, but he's quickly immobilized, taking a punch straight to the ribs, spitting from the pain. Daejun grabs his arm tightly and throws him to the ground with force, ready to knee him in the face. At that moment, the bully breaks into a sweat from fear. Calmly, Daejun tells him that it was a close call this time, and then he almost killed him. Meanwhile, at the internet cafe, Kim dies in his game, saying he lost even with auto combat, and Jisiak tells him he shouldn't come to the internet cafe just to play on his phone, adding that auto combat has its limits. At that moment, Kim gets a call. He answers, asking why they took so long, only to be shocked and scared when he hears that all of his friends were defeated. One of the bullies, terrified, senses something is coming. He starts running through a dark area, desperately looking behind him as he runs. He notices something approaching. It's a giant hand, and he starts screaming in desperation. He runs even faster, crying as the hand chases him. Seeing a light at the end of the tunnel, the bully begins to feel relieved, saying that once he gets out, he'll be safe. But before he can finish his sentence, the hand catches him, pressing down with its immense strength. He's so close to the exit, manages to escape, jumps, and mockingly smiles at the situation. Excited, he says he's alive. With a deadly aura, the protagonist appears, preparing to deliver the final blow. In shock, the bully realizes it's the transfer student. The fist comes flying toward him. Fallen on the ground, the bully wakes up. It was just a nightmare. Looking down at him, Daejun asks if he's awake. As he stands up, he sees all of his friends injured. Kicking the bully, Daejun tells him to get up and join the line. He scolds them for gathering like cowards, while another bully reports over the phone that the new kid took on 4 students at once. Chejunwoo asks if there's anyone like that at Dragon High, and his friend replies no, saying he's a transfer student from another city. A scared Kim thanks him for the update. Meanwhile, the protagonist asks the bully who gave the orders. He asks if it was Kim Myung-joon because the bully mentioned his name earlier, and the bully realizes he's in deep trouble if Kim finds out about this failure. He tells the new kid that he's mistaken, but his collarbone is pressed hard as the protagonist asks if he's some kind of clown. Terrified, the bully admits that Kim sent them but begs him not to say anything to Kim. From a distance, the girl watches the new kid and wonders if he's some kind of gangster. Looking at her, Daejun asks what she's doing there, and the bully says she followed him because she likes him. Extremely irritated, she screams that she doesn't like him, saying she hates him and hurling several insults about his appearance. With his self-esteem plummeting, the bully apologizes and says she was following him in a suspicious way. This catches Daejun's attention. Not knowing what to do in this situation, the girl says he's watching too many movies and is mistaken, saying she doesn't like getting involved in this kind of violence and then walks away. Suspicious, the new kid keeps staring at her. As she leaves the alley, she sees one of the technical school students, thinking that everyone in this area seems like a gangster. The 2 students say she's very pretty and different from the girls at their technical school. Meanwhile, the bully exchanges his phone number with the protagonist, but Daejun, filled with anger, tells him to bring Kim Myung-joon to him, and the bully agrees to the demand. The next day at school, impatient, Daejun wonders why Kim still hasn't shown up, even though the 3rd class has already ended. Yang Jinmo, the bully, says he hasn't seen Kim at school today and tells Daejun to believe him. Philosophically, the new kid recites the saying, if Muhammad won't go to the mountain, then the mountain will go to Muhammad. Sometime later in class 6. With a serious expression, Daejun opens the door. The bully Yang is surprised to see the new kid in his classroom. Daejun asks who Kim Myung-joon is, and the bully pretends not to know. Pressing his collarbone again, Yang realizes it's Daejun and that he didn't recognize him because of the glasses. Everyone is watching this scene, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, a girl enters the classroom, asking why the new kid is doing this in another classroom and why Yang Jimo is just letting it happen, telling him not to embarrass himself. At that moment, she grabs the protagonist by his jacket, realizing he's the transfer student, and asks why he's doing this. He asks why she's pulling him out of nowhere, and she responds with a hard slap straight to his face, knocking his glasses to the ground. The girl then tells him to speak politely, saying he must not know who she is. Surprised, he admits that he doesn't and asks what she's going to do if the glasses were broken. Ignoring him, she says he has no idea since he's new and asks if he knows Bak Soo-hyuk, the leader of the 3rd-year students at Dragon High. Unfazed, the new kid says he doesn't know him. Totally infatuated, she says Bak Soo-hyuk is her appa, and in her thoughts, she thinks about how good-looking Daejun is without glasses. The protagonist, however, asks what any of that has to do with him. Noticing another student approaching, this student kicks Yang in the stomach, leaving the new kid surprised. He grabs the bully by the hair, delivering a palm strike, then preparing to hit him again with even more force, making the bully spit. Curious, Daejun wonders what's going on. In immense pain, Yang mutters the name Kim Myung-joon. At that moment, the new kid realizes it's Kim Myung-joon and asks if it's really him. Kim replies, confirming that it's him and that he heard the transfer student was looking for him. Daejun responds, saying he was indeed looking for him as well. At that moment, all the students are terrified, making the new kid realize he's being watched by the entire class. He remembers when his mission chief told him he could do whatever he wanted. With a mocking tone, Kim says there's no reason for Daejeon to be looking for him and asks what he wants. Daejeon begins to say what he wants and quickly moves to throw a punch, startling Kim with the speed of his movement. But suddenly, the punch is blocked. The one who blocks it is Jiseok, who steps into the fight, asking the protagonist why he started a fight out of nowhere. Confused, Daejeon asks who he is. Jiseok introduces himself as Yoo Jiseok from Class 5, and despite this being an issue from another class, he says things shouldn't be solved recklessly. Jiseok then tries to take Daejeon down to the ground, but he hears a cracking sound and is shocked, realizing his arm is locked in place. Trembling, he understands that he can't knock the new kid down or even move him an inch. Mockingly, Daejeon compliments Jiseok's waist strength, asking if he's really trying to bring him down. Yoo retracts his arm and changes the subject, saying that no matter how chaotic the school is, Daejeon should know what's going on. Kim hugs Yang, saying maybe this happened because of the confusion from the previous day. Quickly shifting his demeanor, Kim grabs the bully by the hair again, telling him he needs to explain himself. Sweating profusely, Yang begins to speak, but he's interrupted by a left hook straight to his face, leaving Daejeon surprised by Kim's action. Kicking the bully, Kim says this whole situation is making him feel like trash. Defending himself, Yang keeps apologizing for everything. Extremely irritated, Kim asks if Yang's head is empty, and if it was really so hard to just follow orders. The protagonist watches silently. After beating the bully, the leader of Class 6 admits he failed to manage the situation. Looking back, he asks why the new kid is doing this without evidence, and despite not being at fault, says he feels like trash. Diverting his gaze, Daejeon starts to present his evidence, but he realizes he has none. Frustrated, Kim tells the bully to stop pretending to suffer, and Jiseok tells him to calm down. Jiseok then tells the new kid that he made a false accusation, and since they don't care about the agreements between classes, neither should he. The bell begins to ring. Thinking it over, the protagonist acknowledges that there's nothing more he can do right now, so he says he's leaving. Proud, Kim says Jiseok handled the situation well, and Jiseok admits he was a bit nervous. He comments that the new kid is indeed strong and that it's better not to fight him. Holding his phone, Kim says there's only one way to deal with this. Sometime later in Class 1, the teacher is giving a lesson. Daejeon is deep in thought, telling himself that he knows Kim is guilty, but his authority was stolen from him in that moment without him realizing it. He remembers when Kim hit Yang Jinmo and how Jiseok defended his friend. He knows that if he hits someone who doesn't care about the school's ranking system, he'll be seen as the bad guy, and since the only victim was a bully, it makes any investigation as the leader of the bullies much harder. At that moment, the teacher says that in wars, having a justification is essential. Paying attention, Daejeon fixes the idea of using justification in his mind, understanding that he needs a reason to take action. Meanwhile, behind the school, 5 students are being beaten up. Yang is hit last, receiving 2 slaps instead of 1 like the others. Irritated, Kim curses them, asking how they couldn't take down a single guy. The bully Yang thinks that even Kim isn't confident in fighting alone and starts to say that the transfer student isn't normal. Answering a phone call, Kim tells the bully to be quiet. It's Aijung on the other end, sitting on top of someone. These people didn't collect the money they were supposed to, and Aijung says he needs to take a call. He asks Kim what happened yesterday. Kim says they need to gather Jinwoo and the rest of the group because he tried to handle it and failed. He says that after they leave the new kid nearly dead, they'll finish the job. Curious, the bully from the technical school asks if he's strong and mentions having a lot of people to outnumber him. Jinwoo steps in, wanting to say something. Listening carefully, Kim asks who he's talking about, wondering who the girl from yesterday was, and asks Yang who they're referring to. The bully wonders why they're talking about her since she has no relation to this fight. Yang asks why, and Jinwoo replies saying he's going to hit her, mentioning that she's his type, and with a creepy grin says he'll have some fun with her. Kim says he'll take her along too, and bids goodbye while Yang is left confused as to why she's being involved. At that moment, the leader asks if the bully hurt him, making Yang realize they really want to bring her into this. He blames himself and wonders what he should do. Frightened, Yang thinks they should wait, recalling that according to school rules, you can only take over a classroom by fighting the leader of that class, and thus they can't mess with students from other classrooms. He thinks that since the girl is from Class 9 and the leader of that class, Lee Sung-hoon, is responsible for it, he won't stay quiet. Kim responds that it doesn't matter because girls don't pay protection money. Recalling when he met Lee Sung-hoon, Kim says he can take over Class 9 afterward, concluding that Yang shouldn't worry about it and just focus on bringing the 2 students he asked for. Meanwhile, in Class 1, kneeling on the ground, the bully apologizes, saying this kind of thing will never happen again. The blonde mentions the rumor that the new kid defeated 4 bullies and Minho is impressed, while Hojong says the kid is already a legend. Then the blonde says he wants to be good friends with the transfer student, and Hojong replies that they hardly even interact with him. With his feet on the bully, Daejeon questions if it's really his fault while the bully continues apologizing. Remembering how he was beaten, the protagonist concludes that this bully seems more like a pitiful guy. Telling the bully to apologize to the girl from yesterday, Yang, embarrassed, says yes and offers to buy him tteokbokki as an apology. Surprised, the new kid wonders if he should accept. thinking about how he feels sorry for this bully. In the end, he accepts and thanks him for the offer since the bully is paying. Meanwhile, in class 9, Jian asks if he's going to buy tteokbokki for her as an apology, and he says yes. Being cautious, he assures her that he has no ulterior motives and just wants to apologize. He mentions that Daejun is coming too, and Era immediately chimes in, thrilled about it, telling him to hurry up and go. Yang says he didn't invite Era. Her friend says no, as it would be awkward, and that it's just the two of them going to eat. Era starts begging because this might be her only chance to go out with a new student. Yang, giving in, says Era can come too since he'll pay for both of them and calls it a double date, but immediately regrets saying that. Reluctantly, Jian accepts the invitation but admits it's a terrible idea. Surprised, the bully says they'll meet after school. As he walks away, Yang starts questioning what he just did, thinking he really thought they'd just go out to eat, and now he can't believe he involved the girl in this fight. He wonders what he should do. Then the boy with the glasses catches his attention, thinking it must be Minsu, Daejun's desk mate, wondering if they're close. Sometime later, as the sun sets, two students from the technical school ask if it's okay for them to get involved in this fight, since it's an issue from another school. Jongmin says it needs to be done because Kim is hiding behind them. The students then ask what Kim will do if he gets crushed by them. They say Kim will have to transfer schools or drop out if that happens, but they believe Kim Myung-jun will help their group take over Bonjin High School after he takes over Jumryeon High School, increasing their earnings. Jongmin doesn't want to keep hitchhiking, and for that to happen, the transfer student needs to be stopped. At the same time, in another part of the city, Daejun is walking with the bully and the two girls from class 9, thinking about how strange this combination of people is, while Jian finds this situation uncomfortable. Era is only thinking about eating with the new kid and how quickly things are progressing. Curious, the protagonist asks about the place they're going to, noting that everything seems closed, wondering if they have tteokbokki at a place like this. The bully confirms while avoiding eye contact. Completely smitten, Era says that good restaurants are always in places like this, and sometimes they don't even have signs. Surprised, the bully remarks that she knows her stuff, and she responds, saying she knows all the best restaurants, but that she didn't know there was a good one in this neighborhood, and Jian adds that she didn't know either. At that moment, the new kid asks the bully for the name of the restaurant, and he starts getting nervous. Suspicious, Daejun asks why he's so nervous and if he's up to something. Looking behind him, he sees several students, wondering what's going on. He realizes they're students from the technical school. Furious, he calls Yang Jinmo. Yang kneels down and begins apologizing. Terrified, he says Daejun can kill him when this is over, and that he had no choice. Jian, now scared, starts to realize what's happening, and Era, confused, asks her friend what's going on. Angry, Jian calls Yang trash, and he, still kneeling, says he didn't want to drag her into this. In shock, Jian says he should have at least left Era out of the situation. Then the thug from the technical school calls the girl hot and says she looks even more beautiful when she's angry. Another bully asks Yang if he's not afraid of Kim for kneeling to the enemy. Walking toward them, he asks why the bully is kneeling. At that moment, the new kid calls out to Yang. With a murderous glare, he tells Yang he'll kill him later, leaving the bully utterly terrified. One of the technical school students asks if that's the guy who defeated 4 students at once, and his friend replies that the 4 who lost must be idiots, saying Daejun looks pretty weak. Jinwoo says the new kid is probably bringing his school down, but they shouldn't let their guard down, because he and Jongmin have already seen Daejun's true strength. Then one of the students crosses his arms, wondering if Daejun is as strong as they say. This is Min Byung-won from the technical school, and he asks to attack first, saying he wants to find out just how strong the boss of Jumryeon High is. The bully boasts that he's ranked in the top 10 among the first-year students at Bonjin Technical School. As he gives his speech, Daejun wonders where he's looking. Irritated, the bully calls Daejun a pitiful weakling. Daejun says he's looking right at him. Min responds, saying he's not sure if Daejun's really looking at him, but if he's going to fight, he should hurry up. Acting strange, the bully claims he has a unique secret ability and has developed a vision that transcends that of normal people. Running toward the transfer student, he says no one has survived after looking into his eyes. His friend laughs, saying if that were true, they'd all be dead, and that Min is bluffing, but his words are somewhat believable. He then remembers when he faced Min in the past and how it was difficult because of his eyes. You need to look into your opponent's eyes to respond to their attacks, and because of this, it was hard to dodge Min's strikes. Even though he beat Min with his wrestling skills, he doesn't know how the new kid will handle it, but he knows it won't be easy. However, contrary to Min's boasting, Daejun already has him in an arm lock. Shocked, Min asks what happened, saying the chokehold is perfectly locked in. Because of that, he doesn't even know if his friend is conscious or not. Frustrated for not even being able to tell that, since Min's eyes always look the same, Daejun looks at the situation and tells Min to tap out. But the chokehold continues, turning Min's face red, while the protagonist shows no reaction. This makes Jongmin start to worry. All the bullies are left in shock. Dropping Min to the ground, Daejun asks why. He asks if they really thought he'd let go of their friend just because they asked. He questions if they came here with the intention to kill, since they dragged innocent people into the situation, and because of that, he's going to fight with the same determination to kill. One of the students says Daejeon still doesn't get what's happening, and that defeating one of them doesn't mean anything because there are still 9 more. Another student asks if Daejeon thinks he'll be the last one standing. The protagonist walks over to Era and asks her to hold his backpack, telling her to stay back because things are about to get dangerous. Blushing with embarrassment, her friend says this isn't some romance webtoon. Walking toward the bullies, Daejeon stretches and tells them to come at him all at once. The students plan to surround the new kid and attack him with 5 people first, and if he falls, they'll all stomp on him. So they begin walking to set up the formation, surrounding Daejeon with 5 people. He observes the situation and thinks about what to do. He decides to go after one near the wall, throwing himself at him with full force, slamming him into the wall. After that, he delivers a punch to finish him off. At that moment, one of the bullies curses at him and charges forward. Grabbing some dirt from a nearby pot, Daejeon throws it directly at the bully to confuse him. At the same time, a blonde guy comes in with a powerful kick, which the transfer student catches, immediately throwing him to the ground, dodging another punch right after. Daejeon responds with a right uppercut under the bully's chin, and kicks the blonde guy directly in the face. Shocked, Yang says he knew the protagonist was strong, but didn't realize he was this strong, wondering if he might be able to defeat Kim Myeonjun and Yoo Ji-seok, and that he could even become the leader of the entire first year. Correcting himself, he says that not only can he do it, he's certain Daejeon will. Terrified, the weird kid asks his friends what they're doing and tells them to attack now. They rush in all at once, but the protagonist starts running too, easily dodging a punch. He counters with a left hook to the ribs, then finishes with a right punch to the face. Another one charges at him, but gets kicked before even getting close. Spitting out saliva from the stomach blow, he receives another kick directly to the neck, collapsing to the ground. Now only the 2 main bullies remain. Sweating, Daejeon says 7 at once is a bit tough, and now there are just 2 left. Jinwoo, laughing nervously, says he can only laugh and that Daejeon isn't human. Watching the fight, Jongmin notes that Daejeon must have dealt with situations like this before, since when 2 bullies rushed at him, he forced them into a straight line, meaning they weren't able to surround him. This made it so the person behind was blocked by the person in front, preventing them from attacking at the same time, forcing a one-on-one scenario. Admitting that the new kid is strong, Jongmin is impressed. At that moment, more people arrive. Worried, the protagonist watches as the group approaches. Jongmin says he really needs to buy a motorcycle soon. One of the bullies arrives, surprised to see that all the others have already been beaten, but is happy to have brought a bat, saying his dream is to beat people with a bat. At this point, Jongmin acknowledges the new kid's strength, but says that even though he's done well, his fate is to die today. Uncertain about what to do, Daejeon scratches his head while assessing the situation, and Jongmin asks if he really thinks he can handle this alone. Someone arrives asking if Daejeon is really alone. Everyone turns to see who it is. It's Minsu, the protagonist's friend, and Daejeon asks what he's doing there. More people follow behind Minsu, leaving the new kid surprised. Suddenly, along with Minsu, the blonde Hojong and Minho arrive to help. Minho says he came to help the leader of Class 1, also admitting that while he's annoyed Daejeon took his place as leader, he couldn't just ignore what was happening. Surprised, the new kid asks how they knew they were there. Minsu says it's because of Yang, who immediately tells him to keep quiet. Jongmin, realizing he was tricked, gets irritated. Yang says he was talking to himself when the bully overheard, saying he has good ears. Furious, Jongmin curses at him, saying it's all because of him, and that Kim Myeonjun is going to kill him no matter what, but he'll kill Kwon Daejeon first. Nervous, Yang says he doesn't even like Kim because he makes him do all sorts of cowardly things, adding that he's not the type to take orders quietly anymore and won't be Kim's subordinate any longer, calling the technical school students idiots. Minho then asks if Yang is on their side now, saying that's good because it's one more person for their group. But they still have around 7 or 8 people on the other side, so he asks who their leader is. It's probably one of these 2. Minho suggests that Daejeon fight the 2 leaders while their group handles the rest. Minsu says he won't fight and will just stay put. Observing, Jongmin realizes that Minho is a former leader. When they see Hojong, they mistake him for a mercenary adult. Before Daejeon can thank Minho for his willingness to help in this fight, he says he doesn't trust them to handle this, because each person will have to take down 1 or 2 students, and one of them even has a weapon. At that moment, Minho tells Daejeon not to worry because he's a dirty fighter. Dropping his bag to the ground, he tells everyone to get ready. One of the bullies puts his phone in his pocket. Hojong opens some kind of folder. Minho pulls something from his bag. It's a fighting baton, while the blonde bully grabs brass knuckles. Meanwhile, Hojong is holding a key. Minho says they're a bit different outside of school. Surprised, Daejeon wonders if they have crap for brains, not understanding why their bags are full of weapons. One of the bullies says the redhead is the legendary master of all weapons, and his friend asks if he's talking about a video game. Then the blonde bully says it sounds like they're talking about Minho, and Minho calls out the guy with the baseball bat. Asking if he knows how to use a bat, the bully replies that all he needs to do is hit someone on the head. Confident of victory, Minho challenges the bully, saying he'll teach him a lesson. Annoyed, the bully says he's not responsible if Minho's head gets smashed. Mocking him, Minho tells him to go ahead and try. The bully rushes in, saying he's going to kill him. At that moment, Minho notices he's right-handed, and that when beginners use a bat, they lift it to the right and bring it down diagonally. Throwing chalk dust into the bully's face, Minho prepares for a strike, landing a punch directly in the bully's stomach, leaving him shocked at what just happened. Minho follows up with a hard kick to the groin, making the bully drop to his knees, and finishes with a kick to the face. The other students are stunned, not understanding just how dirty Minho can fight. After the fight, Minho picks up one of the bats and says he's good at using them. Holding both the baton and the bully's bat, he says it's time for the rest of the extras. Focused on the fight, the nerd asks if this is a double sword style. Nervous, one of the students says Minho is crazy for using weapons and kicking people in the groin, calling him disgusting. Excited, Minho says he'll come to the student if he doesn't come to him. In response, the bully rushes forward, thinking he needs to protect his face and his groin. But Minho dodges his punch, countering with a strike to the lower thigh. At that moment, the nerd charges in as well. Hojong quickly punches him in the face, leaving the nerd furious for the interruption. With a murderous look, Hojong brandishes his ki. Seeing all of this, one of the students says they're crazy and that they need to grab something off the ground. One of them picks up a bottle, asking if it's too dangerous, and his friend responds that now's not the time to think about that. Surprisingly, the blonde bully rushes in at high speed, punching one of the students. The other retaliates with a kick to the blonde, but Yang quickly arrives, kicking the bully in the stomach. The weird guy says the whole situation is a mess. With arrogance, Daejeon says the numbers from before didn't matter, asking if they fight with their mouths, calling them to the fight. Confident, both of the main bullies begin preparing for battle. Jongmin says it doesn't matter how many fights Daejeon has won, in a one-on-one he'll never lose. He says he'll fight first, and if it doesn't go well, his friend should step in to help. Thinking that because Daejeon's punches are fast, he can't risk staying in a prolonged fistfight. Jongmin gets into position to start the fight, rushing quickly toward the protagonist. Daejeon catches him, leaving the bully totally confused. Daejeon pushes his attack away, pressing down on his head. At that moment, Jongmin's friend tries to help, but the new kid dodges the kick, barely managing to dodge. Jongmin wraps his arms around Daejeon's torso, leaving the protagonist surprised. With rage in his eyes, the bully says it's over now because he's been caught by a wrestler from behind. Surprised, Daejeon wonders if Jongmin just said wrestler. Pulling Daejeon with all his strength, Jongmin says he's going to kill him. But Daejeon starts walking, even while being held, and Jongmin says he can't escape. Grabbing one of Daejeon's arms tightly, lifting his body, Jongmin says he'll finish it now. He prepares for a back suplex, a technique where you grab your opponent and throw them behind you. Depending on how they land, it could be deadly. Jongmin is successfully executing the move, but Daejeon holds onto the wall, using his strength to prevent himself from falling. At that moment, Jongmin is in shock, wondering why he can't move. Realizing that Daejeon ran close to the wall on purpose, both of them end up falling to the ground, knocking him unconscious on the spot. It was a punch with immense impact. The girl is visibly shocked. Even after that punch, the new student goes for another hit, but the fallen bully on the ground tells him to stop and admits defeat. He begs again for him to stop, saying he was wrong and that he'll never touch him again. With a murderous aura, Daejeon curses at Jongmin, landing another punch on him and locking him in its chokehold. While Jongmin begs for mercy, the protagonist says he's going to die today. He asks what that guy can do for him now, questioning the bully, saying that the reason he entered the school was to break the hierarchy. He asks who he thinks will have control of Golden Dragon High, Kim Myung-jun or the person strangling him right now. Meanwhile, in the group fight, Yang punches the nerd square in the face, knocking him to the ground. Afterward, they declare that they're done there, threatening Jongmin, who just tells them to leave, and they disappear quietly. Jongmin accepts it without complaining, wondering if this is really happening. Minho approaches the new student and asks if he's done and if he's going to let the guy go. Daejeon says he'll never let them mess with Golden Dragon High again. Minho mentions that Kim is recruiting students from other schools and suggests they just take it back to him and finish it all. But Daejeon replies that there's another way to handle it and that he's very tired, thanking them for coming and saying it's the only reason he's alive. The three of them blush with embarrassment. He also thanks Minsu, who says he didn't really do anything special. Looking back, Daejeon asks Yang Jinmo if he's forgetting something. Recalling the protagonist's words from earlier, Yang asks if it's about him having to die. Crying, he says he hasn't even been in a relationship yet. Daejeon turns to the girls and asks if they got hurt, and Era asks if the fight is over. He confirms it is, which brings her relief. Approaching the girl with glasses, he asks if she's okay, and she thinks he's holding her by the waist. She's completely mesmerized by his presence, and he asks why her face is so red and if she's alright. Era responds that she's fine. Feeling awkward, the new student apologizes for everything that happened. Era says it's Yang Jinmo's fault and not his, but her friend says that his very existence is a mistake. Shocked, everyone looks at her as she says that he uses bullies like toys, beating them up and bothering everyone around him by dragging them into his problems. She adds that they're all cut from the same cloth. Jaina finishes by saying that he solves everything in childish, cheap ways and suggests he go somewhere quiet and just die. Then the two girls walk away. Hojong admits that she's right, but he's still hurt by it, while the blonde guy says there's no arguing with her words. At that moment, the protagonist says nothing. Yang stays silent too, while Era looks back at them. A bit later, Era asks Gina if she's alright. Gina apologizes, saying she let herself get carried away by her words, but that it's something she hates. Thinking to herself, Gina concludes she doesn't care about the transfer student anymore, and at least he doesn't seem like someone who'll get involved in her plans. Then Gina says she's going somewhere else. Era realizes she's going to see Jiwoon, and Gina confirms it, saying she missed him today. Era says goodbye to her friend. Worried, Era thinks her friend must be more sensitive today because of her younger brother. Walking along the sidewalk, she reflects that the day was worth it, even though she didn't get to eat tteokbokki, and that Jimmo seemed to feel really bad for what he did. Back with the group, Daejun puts his hand on Yang's shoulder, asking how he wants to die by drowning, and tells him he'll have to pay 10,000 won for it. Shocked, Yang says he at least wants to apologize to the girls before he dies. Daejun says that yes, he should apologize to them and admits that Yang is bad, but there are even worse people out there. A while later at the hospital, inside a room is a 15-year-old patient. It's Gina's younger brother, lying in a hospital bed, breathing through a machine. As Gina watches her brother, she wonders if bullies don't feel guilty for doing all these things to others. She thinks that nothing justifies it, as they beat each other up for fun. She asks herself if they think this is all a game. Then it cuts to Kim complaining about dying in his mobile game. Saying that he died again in auto combat, he questions why that feature even exists if he keeps losing like this. He declares that he's going to uninstall this terrible game. Then he notices something approaching. It's Yang Jimmo and some of his classmates. Kim asks where Jungmin went and where he came from, telling him to take his hands out of his pockets. Meanwhile, Gina reflects on whether everyone is doing the same thing in the same way, wondering if they don't realize that this isn't a game. Yang starts walking toward Kim, staring him down, causing Kim to get angry. He clenches his fists in front of him, and Kim notices something happening. Quickly dodging Yang's punch, moving sideways, he calls Yang a bastard. Then he punches Yang in the ribs. At that moment, another student charges at Kim too, throwing a flying kick that Kim also dodges. Another student suddenly appears and lands a punch on Kim's face. One of the other students shows up, kicking Kim under the chin. Yang punches the leader of Class 6 in the face as well. All bruised and battered, Kim thinks about how terrible this group is. As the group unleashes their fury on Kim, Jenna wonders about putting herself in someone else's shoes and whether, when you have to pay for your mistakes, you'll feel regret and reflect on them. She contemplates the philosophy of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, questioning whether seeking revenge is the right path. Kim is desperate amidst all this chaos. He begins to run from the scene. The group chases him down the street at night. Kim continues running, glancing back. He crashes into a fixed sign on the ground. Yang approaches to land another blow, but Kim is faster and punches Yang squarely. Yang retaliates with a kick to his ribs, sending Kim flying onto the sidewalk. One of the students says they'll hit him lightly, and Yang says Kim is going to pay for his karma. Yang asks Kim if it was fun ruling for all that time, while another student says Kim looks cute and he's scared. Yang taunts that Kim can't do anything alone and feels like a fool, and now they'll never see each other again. At the hospital, Jenna reflects on how the world doesn't work in a rational way, and because of that, she's going to make them pay in a straightforward way. She promises she'll deal with the people who put her brother in that state. Then she begs him to wake up. The next day at school, the student tells another that he heard Kim got beaten up by Yang the day before. Showing a video of their fight, a hand appears at the door. It's the high and mighty group of Yang. Another student asks what happened afterward, and someone wonders if the boss has changed. Resting his feet on the desk, Yang Jinmo has become the new boss and asks if Kim Myeonjun didn't show up today. A lackey asked about deliveries and if they should continue doing them the usual way. Yang asks his friend what they should do, and he responds by suggesting they have a race and pick the fastest one to be the new delivery guy. Someone walks into the room with their hands in their pockets, catching Yang's attention. It's Daejun from Class 1. He pulls his hand out of his pocket, acting a little shy, and asks what brings him to his classroom. At that moment, the new student congratulates Yang on becoming the new boss and says he must be having a lot of fun. A little nervous, Yang thanks him but admits he's not really enjoying it. Interrupting him, Daejun tells Yang to decide if he's going to fight him as the boss or if he's just going to take a beating and get it over with. Yang asks Daejun to hit him gently. Daejun says it'll be gentle, then gets ready to punch him. He lands a strong punch right on Yang's face, leaving a clear mark on his cheek. As Yang falls, he thinks he's feeling much lighter now, almost as if he's flying because he feels so light. But then he panics, thinking that he can't really be flying just from a punch. Looking at his body from the window, Daejun looks back and says that since they're a gang, they should get a beating too. But one of the students quickly says they disbanded the group just 3 seconds ago. Putting his hand on the student's shoulder, Daejun accepts what he said and warns them to live a controlled life from now on. All three students emphatically agree. One of them says his dream now is to be a crush can, while the other jokes about competing to see who can crush their life the most, admitting they're all doomed. The other students are left speechless by what just happened, and one of them remarks that this new student is the strongest person they've ever seen. Slapping Jinmo's face, one of the students tries to wake him up as he lies unconscious on the floor of the classroom. Kwon Daejin has become the leader of classes 1, 2, 3, and 6 at Jumryong High School, where he studies. That makes 4 classrooms conquered in his first week after transferring. His 3 friends start celebrating the fact that Daejin has taken over 4 classrooms and begin praising him endlessly. Annoying, the protagonist smacks all 3 of them in the face with a book and tells them to stop making noise. Hojong comments that it's nothing compared to the first time Daejin hit him and invites him to the internet cafe since he recently hit gold rank in ** League of Legends **. Adjusting his glasses, Daejin calls them annoying and asks if they should go together. They cheer and Minho says he's still bronze, but Hojong tells him to stay quiet. A girl pulls the blonde's shirt, saying she plays * League of Legends *, but the blonde doesn't believe her and asks what her rank is. When she can't answer, the blonde accuses her of lying just to hang out with Daejin. She punches him square in the face, saying she can play * Cartrider * with them instead. She then starts kicking the blonde while Daejin continues studying. At the same time, in class 5, Jiseok is trying to get in touch with someone. His friend asks if Kim is thinking of dropping out of school. At that moment, Jiseok says that maybe Kim won't come to school anymore. Clearly interested, the girl says the new student is both handsome and good at fighting. She asks what Jiseok plans to do now and if he isn't confident enough on his own. He admits he is. The girl remarks that Jiseok shouldn't have been greedy about the ranking, or he should have formed an alliance with the other guys. Jiseok explains that the remaining classes for a potential alliance are 4, 5, 7, 8, and 9. At that moment, Jiseok finds the girl's comment strange and asks if she really doesn't care about the ranking. She confirms that she doesn't, but then remembers the protagonist without his glasses, thinking she can't believe the word Appa came out of her mouth and wonders what she should do about him. The next day at school, in class 1 where the protagonist is, his friends arrive and the blonde asks if Daejin is already in class, asking if he made it home safely the night before. He then asks if Daejin is already studying, to which the new student confirms and asks why. The blonde then says Daejin is better at studying than at gaming, making him sweat nervously. The day before, the blonde had been yelling for Daejin to use his ult, but they ended up losing the match. He asks why the new student said he would carry the team, and if he's sure he's gold rank. Daejin replies that it's better not to get too caught up in the game while his hand shakes on the mouse. The girl then asks if he wants to risk his life for a game, and the blonde looks confused by the question. She tells Daejin not to pay attention to him, saying that in the end, these boys who risk their lives gaming don't know much, and Daejin thanks her. Playing another game, she asks what he's doing blocking the track. Slamming her hands on the table, someone approaches the students, catching the girl's attention and pointing to a sign that says it's forbidden to rage, saying they're all kicked out. Feigning a cough, Daejin says that if they had been kicked out, he would have shown his real skills since it's been a while since he warmed up his fingers. He stands up, saying he needs to go to another class, and his friends ask why. Removing his glasses, he says it's nothing special, just something he needs to take care of. As he walks, he reflects that the project he's involved in isn't simply about beating up troublemakers, and that the ultimate goal is to reform the school's image. Arriving at Kim's class, he asks about him. When he gets there, one of the students asks what he's doing in this classroom, mentioning that they're living a quiet life. At that moment, Daejin asks about the boy's hand. The boy says not to worry, as his hands have healed enough that he can wiggle his fingers. At that moment, the new student strikes between the boy's hands. The student flinches, and the protagonist reminds him that he should have stayed quiet. As Daejin leaves, he tells the boy to live that way now, and if he complains, he'll lose his hand. Now he's in class 3, keeping the troublemakers under control so they don't get out of hand. When he arrives, he notices that Shim Sangbo's gang never shows up at school, and that the class is much better now. At that moment, he thinks the next stop is class 6. In classroom 6 at the school, we see several students chatting and causing a ruckus. Suddenly, someone slams their hand on the desk with force. Yang says it's way too noisy, and tells everyone to quiet down and study. One of the students can't believe Yang is about to start studying and asks if he hit his head. In his thoughts, Yang knows that Gina is the top student in the school, and to be worthy of her, he needs to be as well. Then, a girl calls out to him. It's the queen, Bak Suzy, who tells him to study quietly. Embarrassed, he apologizes. His friend asks why he's being so bold and says that no matter what they do, they will have to live a controlled life. Bak Suzy is getting stressed out, and she recalls her previous encounter with the protagonist. She then calls Yang, telling him to come quickly. Yang quickly stands up, apologizing. Suzy asks if he remembers that day, and Yang asks which day. She reminds him and asks if he knows she didn't call Daejin Appa. Yang says he's aware. While she explains, Yang is focused on studying. She calls him again, asking if he's paying attention to what she's saying, and he responds that he's listening carefully. Annoyed, Suzy says she'll let go this time, and someone asks where Yang Jimmo is. It's the protagonist calling for him. At that moment, Suzy feels insecure and embarrassed. From a distance, she sees Daejeon explaining some things to Yang. Then the protagonist bids him goodbye. Returning to the conversation, Yang apologizes and says that he serves Daejeon now. He asks what Suzy was saying, and she orders him to take off his glasses. Obediently, he removes his glasses. Furious, Suzy starts hitting him with a hairbrush. Once again, he apologizes for leaving her talking to herself. After hitting him, she realizes she's sweating and says that because of him, her makeup is melting, so she can't hit him anymore. Yang asks if she's forgiving him, and she calls over some students. The three immediately obey her. She orders them to step on Yang Minmo. They grab him by the head, apologizing while stepping on him. As she reapplies her makeup, Suzy wonders what to do about Kwon Daejeon and how he dares to act like a leader in her presence. She tells them to stop and asks them to go to classroom 5 to call Jiseok. Arriving in the classroom, Jiseok asks why he's been summoned and says he's surprised Yang isn't dead. Suzy replies that his crime irritated her. She then asks if he remembers what she said that day. Jiseok asks if she's talking about the alliance and says he thought about it too. He asks why she wants to do it, and she replies that it's to make Daejeon suffer. Jiseok says that if that's her goal, she could tell her ***, but Suzy says she can't do that, because if she did, Daejeon might actually end up dead, and that's too much for her. She imagines herself on a throne as a queen, using Daejeon as a footstool while he thanks her for the honor. Irritated, she says he should refer to her as Lady Suzy. Jiseok is shocked by this, and Suzy says she just wants to see him crawl back to her and asks for his help. At this moment, Jiseok thinks about all the leaders of classrooms 4, 7, 8, and 9 and how he has a loose alliance with most of them. Realizing there's no other way, he understands that forming an alliance isn't enough. He needs to ensure Kwon Daejeon gets expelled from school. At a golf sports center, an adult man is practicing golf in an indoor setting. His colleague remarks that President Kim's posture is perfect as always and asks how the ball's trajectory can be so flawless. He jokingly asks if Kim is planning to debut as a golf clothing model. And at that moment, the president tells CEO Lee that he's teasing him for being too old for that. The president asks if the boy next to Lee is a new recruit, and Lee confirms, saying the newbie is very sharp. Lee adds that he looks like a model and is talented too. Then, Director Lee enters the conversation, saying she's there to give a detailed report on the project's progress. The president starts reading the report and comments that it's interesting, concluding that Kwon Daejeon is really incredible. He asks Director Lee to schedule a drink with the principal of Bong High School as a favor, and she asks if it'll be at the usual place. He responds, where else would it be, which irritates her. Continuing his golf game, the president tells her to let Daejeon know to keep up the effort because after this, he'll handle everything. The director acknowledges and is dismissed. Her colleague comments that it seems like he's been enjoying himself a lot lately. He responds that he's bored and they need to do something together. Later, in the late afternoon during sunset, there is a business establishment. Inside, a meeting of several class leaders is taking place. Yoo Ji-seok, the leader of Class 5, asks if everyone is present. Kwak Do-shik, leader of Class 8, asks if they really need to take attendance since there are only 5 of them there. Hu Sung-hwa, leader of Class 7, says he doesn't feel comfortable being around all of them like this. Park Do-jin, leader of Class 4, is watching the video where Kim is getting beaten up. Lee Sung-hoon, leader of Class 9, asks if the meeting is about the new student, and if he wants to know the leader's opinions about what's been going on. Jiseok confirms that's exactly it, and also wants to hear their thoughts on forming an alliance. Sung-hwa says he's not fond of the idea, and that the reason is he's not interested in rankings, but even so, he has no intention of losing to anyone. At that moment, the leader of Class 8 says they aren't on good enough terms to form an alliance, and that he doesn't even know why they're doing this. He asks if he was afraid of the new student, probably because his friend Kim lost his position. Annoyed, Jiseok says he'll hold back his anger this time, but tells him to be careful with his words. Provoking him further, the leader of Class 8 asks what Jiseok is going to do if he doesn't hold back his anger. Gu Sung-hwa suggests they settle it right now since they've been at odds for a while. Park Do-jin bets 50 on Kwak, and the leader of Class 7 says it's not a bad idea. Irritated, Yu says he thought they could come to an understanding here and asks them to stop with the useless talk. The leader of Class 9 agrees. Kwak asks if he agrees with forming an alliance and questions what he plans to do after it's formed. Lee Sung-hoon says they should first listen to what Yu has to say, since he's the one who called the meeting. Surprised, Yu hadn't expected Lee to agree, knowing rumors about this leader, but never having met him in person. From what he knows, Lee is the leader of the nerds and is considered the weakest, so he thought an alliance might benefit him. Frustrated, Kwak asks why Yu isn't speaking yet. Yu begins to explain that the new student, Kwon Daejeon, has been taking control of other classes at an alarming rate, and they need to do something about it because the situation is becoming tense. Then Sung-hwa, the leader of Class 7, says it's pathetic, and that it's natural for the strongest man to rise to the top. Standing up, he says he's leaving and that this is a waste of his time. One of the leaders is checking the Bitcoin chart during this and asks who will be the boss and how the money will work. Park says he doesn't want to share the money and leaves as well. Stretching, Kwak says he's going too and that this was a waste of time. He adds that you should have thought things through before coming up with this idea. Yu tells Quack to stop now, reminding him that he said he'd only hold back his anger once. Confident, the leader of Class 8 challenges him to a fight, saying he'll kill him, and that this will be a perfect warm-up before his dance practice. Lee asks both of them to calm down, saying it's not the right time for this. Irritated, Quack says it doesn't matter and that Yu thinks he's tough just because he can't control his own anger. Adjusting his glasses, Lee suggests they postpone the fight for now and asks if they don't want to hear what he had to say. Meanwhile, back in Class 4, Park slams his fist on the table. He says he hit it wrong and it's another student's turn to hit. One of his friends asks how the meeting went and Park says it was just about the new student and that the others are just a bunch of idiots. The leader then looks at his book and asks if the student turned the page. The student confirms and apologizes, but Park asks why he's apologizing and calls him up for another round. Once again, Park loses the game and the student wins. Park admits the student is really good today. Annoyed, Park says he only needs to give 40,000 won. Terrified, the student insists that's not necessary and that Park doesn't need to give him anything. Holding back his anger, Park says the student needs to hand over the money since he's the winner. He gives the crumpled bills to the boy and asks for another round. Exhausted, the student reluctantly agrees. When it's Park's turn again, he doesn't win. Surprised, he wonders what's going on, thinking his touch isn't working today. The student suggests that if Park's touch is off, they can leave it for another time. Annoyed, Park just glares at the situation. Suddenly, he slaps the student across the face with his glove, sending him crashing to the floor. Another student, shocked, asks why Park suddenly slapped him out of nowhere. Park responds that his touch wasn't working before, but now it is. He orders the boy to get up quickly and sit back in the chair before he loses his touch again. In pain, the student agrees and goes to sit, while Park tells him to stop crying. Threatening him, Park says he's going to hit him again. Terrified, the boy instinctively covers his face with his hands. Laughing, Park teases him, saying he's scared, and his friend comments that it's cute. Changing the mood, Park demands to know why the boy still hasn't sat down yet. The student then simply accepts the orders because he's already been beaten enough. His hand is trembling, eager to start this game already. With a murderous glare, the bully becomes very irritated seeing the student's hand shaking so much over a simple coin game. Feeling scared, the student calls out to Park, asking if he can back out of this. Unsettled by the question, the bully merely asks if he's really going to quit, while the student apologizes and says he'll bring more money for the next round. Laughing at the situation, the bully says he'll take all the bet money to let the student back out. Perplexed, the student asks if he's going to take all the money, and Park just says, "That's how the game works when you quit." Quickly, he grabs all the boy's money before he can react. Trying to manipulate the situation, he says the student is clueless and that they'll play again tomorrow since he's being kind, as long as the student brings money. As he leaves the room, his friend asks Park to buy some food for him, but the bully says he's going to invest the money. His friend just says he'll probably use it to buy the bet. Nearly crying, the deceived student curses Park in his mind, calling him trash for already having taken $500. Grabbing his phone, he starts planning how to get revenge somehow. Sometime later in room 5, Susie, with her arms crossed, calls out to Jizyuk, saying she heard he and the bullies met up the day before. He and Junna greet her. Cutting straight to the point, she asks the girl to leave for a moment to talk to Jizyuk alone. Feigning friendliness, the girl says they can chat freely. As she leaves, she curses Susie in her mind, wondering who she thinks she is to try and boss others around. Buck confronts Yu, asking if he's going to keep laughing with other girls, and he says he hasn't done anything. Getting straight to the point, he says there won't be an alliance for a while, and that they decided to just observe. Confused, she asks what he's talking about. Returning to yesterday's meeting, the leader of Class 9 says the day to collect the money is coming soon, and that's the reason anyone aims for class leadership. Because Jumryong's gang collects the money in a completely different amount, and inevitably the strongest people gather around them. He concludes by saying that the two may have different motivations, but the motivations of Gu Sumway and Park Dojin are clear and straightforward. They're both greedy for money, and even though they may not seem to care about the ranking, they could act before the money collection. Smiling, he also says they need to figure out the intentions of the transfer student and that there will certainly be conflict before the collection happens, so they should just watch and act afterward. Back to the present, Jiseok says that Class 9's leader, Lee Sung-hoon, ended up becoming the Alliance leader. That's good because he can get rid of the boy at any moment. Arms crossed, his friend questions him, saying in the end Jiseok is just going to do nothing, calling him a pathetic loser. Biting her nails, she says there's no other way and she'll have to do it herself. Sometime later, at dusk in a playground in the city, a blonde delivery driver appears, riding his bike with a box strapped to the back. He's chatting with Park Dojin's group, telling Park he heard his crypto tanked completely in the market. Park then asks how is this doing, and the blonde says he pulled his money out as soon as he entered the coin. Annoyed, Park says he's the only one who got screwed, both in crypto and in his bets. Laughing, the blonde asks if the bully wants some good advice and says if he invests like him, Park will certainly make some money. Dojin says he doesn't have much cash and wonders how much a food delivery driver makes and if he should give it a try too. His colleague asks if the collection day is coming up, wondering if he could make some money from it. Park replies that the day is approaching, but it's not all that much. Smiling, the boy says he got a call and needs to leave, reminding Dojin to let him know as soon as he earns some cash because he'll surely help him invest. That same colleague asks the bully if they shouldn't take at least half before collection day, saying it would be bad if they only got portions of 1.5. Agreeing, Park says he was already thinking of doing that, and his colleague asks who they'll take from first. With arms crossed, confident, Park says they don't need to take from one person at a time. They'll start with the transfer student. Since Daejeon already grabbed 4.5 portions, if they just take from the new kid, they'll already have 5.5 in total. His friend Happy says he just had a genius idea and that they should place bets to see who wins the fight between Park and the new guy. Another member of the group says the idea is interesting and asks if he can bet on the transfer student. Dojin asks if he's the underdog, and that if his friend bets on the underdog and he wins, he'll make a lot of money. Standing up, Park says he suddenly feels like training and is going to do some pull-ups. From a distance, we see 2 men watching the bully leave, and one of them asks if that's Park Dojin. There are 3 men in total, and the one in the middle confirms it's him. When Park and his friends arrive, they bow and call the men veterans. Dojin asks one of the veterans if he's doing well, as he heard the man join a gang after dropping out of school. Crossing his arms, the veteran confirms it but says things are a bit strange now. This catches Park's attention, and he asks what he means. The veteran says his client's target is the freshman, and standing beside him is the terrified student asking Park what he plans to do. Annoyed, the bully asks what student Kim Do-yeon is doing there. Sweating cold, Do-yeon tries to explain but can't say anything. Trying to calm him down, the veteran asks what he's afraid of and tells him to relax. He adds that he's not an amateur, doesn't mix business with personal life, and that since Do-yeon is his junior, he'll just give him a good lesson and the student should have the money ready. Understanding the situation, Park asks if they're taking money from others to beat up their bullies. Mocking the situation, the veteran simply says it's a new business and that he has nothing against the freshman, so there's no need to be mad. Park starts laughing, which leaves the veteran extremely confused as he stares at him. While laughing, Dojin says it's funny, and that the veteran is acting cocky just because he joined a gang, with his friends in the background growing worried about their leader's actions. Irritating the veteran, Park continues, saying that all he does is mess with bullies and that's pathetic. Not believing what he's hearing, his friend asks if he's crazy, and Park concludes by saying the veteran isn't even the senior of the room anymore since he dropped out of school. Bothered, the veteran says Park has gotten quite rude since the last time they met. Facing the freshman, he says he doubts Park doesn't know who's standing in front of him and introduces himself as Yuk Ja-hyun from Biomo Construction. Quickly, he moves his hand toward Dojin's face. He says he's disappointed to see someone he knows become so clueless and that he was planning to go easy on the freshman because they know each other. But now he's going to have to teach him a good lesson. Park then senses a punch coming. He gets hit in the face by his veteran. But the veteran is surprised when he realizes it was actually Dojin who threw his face into the punch, questioning why he would do that. With the fist pressed against his cheek, Park says the veteran's punch has gotten softer and asks if he thinks he can teach him something. Then Park lands a direct punch into the veteran's stomach, calling him a pig. The punch is so strong it makes the veteran scream in pain. Laughing sadistically, Park asks if his punches aren't sinking all the way in because the veteran's gotten fatter. Punching him again, Park wonders how deep he has to hit. The bully screams in pain again. With the veteran almost collapsing to the ground, Park asks if he wants to know something. He says that punching a lump of fat is disgusting and that the veteran should exercise a bit because he can't stand hitting his body. It feels too gross. Then he finishes with a direct punch to the veteran's face. The veteran falls to the ground, leaving his colleagues in shock. The student who hired them is now trembling with fear. Park then tells him not to go around acting tough just because he's big, saying it's only because he stuffs his belly, which leaves his friends even more shocked. Completely deranged, Park says it's just a pile of fat and dares him to come at him. Frightened, his friends say he's really crossed the line this time, calling him crazy and asking what's gotten into him. Park doesn't understand what they mean and says they try to kill him for money. At that moment, he says if the student has enough money to feed the 3 little pigs, he must have quite a bit of cash. And if the student has that much money, he should have given it to them, adding that his friends don't need to get involved because all the money is his. The veteran's friends curse Park, saying he's risking his life over a few bucks. Without saying anything, the freshman goes after one of the veterans. He notices Park approaching. Driven by greed, Park punches the veteran in the stomach and agrees he's doing this for the money. Because of the force of the punch, the veteran spits out some saliva. Park then says he'll be fine as long as he has money. At that moment, another veteran arrives, delivering a headbutt. The blow sends Dojin flying, making him stagger. He starts to get up, irritated, gaining momentum with his flip-flops and socks. He charges full speed at the worried veteran, striking him with a knee directly to the face. The impact is so strong that the veteran's face deforms from the blow, while Park Dojin smiles at him. At that moment, another one of his colleagues grabs Park from behind, immobilizing him. One of Park's friends rushes toward him to help, but the leader refuses, saying he doesn't need help. He jumps back with all his strength, leaving the veteran confused. Then Park manages to free himself, delivering a powerful elbow strike under the veteran's chin. After that, he spins 180 degrees and lands a perfect right hook to the bully's face, knocking him out cold on the ground. The student who paid the veterans is in shock from everything happening and can't stop sweating. Pumped with adrenaline, Park looks at the student and tells him to hand over the money unless he wants to die right now. Scared and panicking, the student screams and starts running, asking what Park is doing. Dojin, completely insane, starts chasing after the student and asks if he really thinks he can escape. While running after the student, one of the veterans appears, holding a baseball bat. At that moment, Dojin realizes what's happening and flexes his arms to defend himself from the blow. He feels scared because he didn't expect another reaction. Holding the baseball bat, the veteran curses Park and says he messed with the wrong person. One of Dojin's friends comes up behind the bully, delivering a body blow straight to his spine. Park is pleased with the help and prepares to finish off the veteran for good. The man can't believe this is actually happening to him. Park quickly lands a powerful punch to the older man's cheek with all his strength. The force is so great that it sends the already heavy man flying. Exhausted, Dojin asks where the student who paid the veterans has gone. The boy has simply vanished, and Park comments that he's faster than he thought. With his hand on his head, Park says that if the student doesn't come to school, he won't get anything, and his friend who saved him asks if their leader is okay. That same friend also wonders if they're in trouble now since the three veterans are gangsters. Confident, Park Dojin says those veterans are just pretending to be gangsters and there's no need to worry because his contacts are better. The next day at school, Daejun is walking down the hallway saying there's nothing better than school lunch and that Minsu should enjoy it. At that moment, the blonde shows up and tells Daejun they need to talk, but without Minsu. Annoyed, the protagonist asks what they want and says if it's nothing important, they're both dead. Minho says he needs to talk to the new guy and mentions that he heard he only wanted to study and wasn't interested in the rankings, then asks Daejun if he's actually planning to take over all the first-year classes. Confused, Daejun asks why Minho is asking that. Hojong says everyone's thinking that, and because it's the new guy, it's entirely possible. Putting his hands on Hojong's shoulders, the transfer student asks if he has 2 lives because he said they would die if they brought up something useless. Then Minho grabs the protagonist's wrists and says it's not useless. He says, changing the subject, that Daejun is the leader of the 4 classes and that soon he'll be receiving the operational costs for all 4 groups. He also mentions he doesn't know much about Daejun's situation but assumes he came to the school for the money. Daejun asks Minho what he's talking about and says he has no idea about this operational cost thing, asking if they're talking about the money left over from the class president, which is used to buy snacks for everyone, and wondering if that's what they mean. One of the students who had been a punching bag arrives and says it's not that and calls him knave. This student continues, explaining that on the surface, they call it operational costs, like it's legitimate money, but in reality, it's simply cash collected from other students. Behind the scenes, it's called protection money, and it's used to protect one class from another, and in the end, that money goes into the pockets of the class leaders. After the punching bag explains this, Daejun recalls when one of the bullies told him there are rules in this school and that he didn't seem to know them. With a suspicious look, he wonders if this is the rule that bully was talking about. The explanation continues. The leaders of each class rank the others, and the ranks are used to establish order. And the amount of money gets doubled if you're the leader of more than one class, which is why everyone wants to be the head of Jumryeon. He concludes by asking if the new guy is going to collect 4 times more than the other leaders, and that before that happens, he's sure people will come after him. Minho thanks the punching bag for the explanation and asks why he's there. With an innocent face, the student says he came to ask them to take care of his part since they'll be targets of other classes from now on. Before he can finish, Daejun slaps his arm. The student asks why he did that again, and the new guy simply says the guy doesn't understand anything. Looking at his friends, he says this business of collecting money isn't going to happen anymore, leaving Minho and Hojong speechless. But the blonde says he can't do that, and that it's not just about them, because part of the first-year collection goes straight to the second year, and from the second year to the third. Minho comments that deciding to do this is the same as turning the entire school against him, and even for Daejun, he won't be able to handle the whole school. With his arms crossed, Daejun admits that if it's the whole school, the risk is really high. But he remembers that his job is to put an end to this kind of thing, and he can't make a habit of ignoring what happens right in front of him. Then he says he's leaving first, and at that moment, Jimmo arrives, calling for him, asking Daejun to follow him because someone wants to see him. Annoyed, Daejun questions why everyone is always after him and why he has to keep repeating this cycle. Looking ahead, he tells Jimmo he'll die if he talks about something useless. Sometime later, near the school cafeteria, they walk together, and the protagonist asks if Yang isn't gathering a group to come after him. Yang says no, not even 10 Bongman students could handle him that day, saying it would take at least 100, and at that moment, the new guy spots a girl and asks if she's the one who wanted to see him, and Yang confirms it, saying her name is Bak Suzy. Irritated, Daejun asks if Yang wants to die. At that moment, Suzy looks at the two of them and asks him to let Jimmo go. Staring at her, the new guy doesn't obey, and she repeats for him to let Jinmo go. Crossing her arms, Baek tells him to do it while remaining polite. She then repeats, asking if he didn't hear her, telling him to release Jinmo. Confused, the protagonist doesn't respond while Yang calls Suzy by name. At that moment, the girl says that even though he's done many things that make him deserve a beating, she's the only one who can give that punishment. Suspicious of the situation, Daejeon says he has no idea what's going on, but according to the school rules, Class 6 is under his control, and that means he can do whatever he wants with its students, including Yang Jinmo. Walking up to the two of them, she asks if he doesn't know. Holding Jinmo's hand while staring at him, the girl says she's above those rules and that he shouldn't try to act like a leader in front of her, telling him to let go. At that moment, she pulls hard. The protagonist tightens his grip on Jinmo's wrist, questioning the nonsensical conversation and saying he won't let him go. Frustrated, Suzy asks if he really won't release Jinmo, calling him an arrogant jerk. At that moment, the new guy says that they're the ones who are arrogant. Elsewhere, we see a man telling 3 students that they have strayed from the path, becoming materialistic and obsessed with money and valuable items, and have disappointed him, saying that karma will make them become puppets of the devil stained by their greed, but that he himself will save them from this sin personally. 2 students stare at him in fear as he says he's not going to kill anyone. This is the second-year leader, part of the Path gang, named Won Ja-ok, saying he's only going to beat them to the brink of death. His second-in-command, Ju Gangmyeong, also comments, saying the students should pay up immediately. Park, with his arms crossed, says that sounds scary and asks if Ja-ok always beats people up, to which the second-in-command responds that he only does it when he feels like trash. Curious, Daejeon asks how much money they managed to collect since they're in charge of the second-year students. The guy with glasses makes a gesture indicating 3 million won, and Park asks if they split all of that among themselves. The guy confirms they do. Happy with the information, the bully says he's really excited about it and that he really wants to take down the transfer student. Then the bully with glasses asks what happened yesterday with that fight between the veterans, and Park says in that kind of situation, Ja-ok wouldn't be able to hold back. Seeing him beating up the students, Park says Ja-ok always advises him to be patient, but it's Ja-ok who's hitting students for being 1 day late in the payment. Changing the subject, Daejeon asks if everything's okay, and the guy with glasses tells him not to worry, saying those veterans aren't even magic apprentices, just boasting about a non-existent gang to make money. After beating up the students, the bald guy looks back, saying it's not easy to walk the practical path of Buddhism, and tells Daejeon that he needs to learn not to stray from the path he must walk. Confident, Park says he was thinking about taking over the entire first-year class, but before that happens, he has to take down the transfer student Kwon Daejeon. Ja-ok says that's a great idea, adding that he shouldn't delay achieving what he wants, and that the idiots on the ground are stuck with their karma because they delayed what needed to be done. With a dark expression, he comments that he'll give them until tomorrow to hand over the money, and they'd better shave their heads along with their anguish and worldly desires before appearing in front of him. He continues saying their sins are too great, and that his fists alone aren't enough as punishment, so they'll have to shave their heads until they shine. Meanwhile, Park Daejeon says he just had an idea. Walking calmly, Ja-ok says he heard about a new sausage bun at the store, and Park asks if he can eat it. The bald guy says yes and invites him to come along to chat on the way. Returning to the previous situation, the two are fighting over Yang Jinmo. Baek Suzy tells the new guy to let go, but he says no. At the same time, while being jostled, Jinmo wonders if he's really that important to others and thinks that being treated this way isn't bad at all. Then the girl tries to pull him with force. Her arm brushes against the girl's chest as she asks why Daejeon is so stubborn. With a suspicious look, Yang says that this isn't bad at all, and that it's so amazing he could die at that moment and be at peace. Curious, the protagonist looks at Jinmo and asks why he's making that face. At that moment, Suzy realizes where Jinmo's arm is resting. She starts feeling a mix of disgust and repulsion. Sweating with fear, Jinmo just stares at her, waiting for the inevitable. She then spins and lands a precise strike on his neck, making him bend over, throwing the boy away with her overwhelming strength. Looking to the side, she tells him he has 3 seconds to disappear from her sight and starts counting. She gets to 2 as Yang desperately asks her to wait, but she reaches 1, making him run like crazy while screaming. They can't tell, but Jinmo is actually running joyfully, blushing, likely because of where his arm had just been. Staring at Daejeon, Suzy says she doesn't care about that jerk and that she has another reason for calling him, which leaves the new guy confused. Then she grabs him by his jacket, throwing him hard against a post. While holding onto his jacket, she tries to say something, but Daejeon just watches, unresponsive. Blushing, she gets closer to his face and he asks what it's about. Then Suzy lowers her head completely, which confuses him. In her mind, she says she needs to look into his eyes to dominate his fighting spirit, but she can't do it, and she doesn't understand why her heart is beating so fast. Not understanding anything, Daejeon says he hears a banging sound and asks if there's some construction going on nearby. Changing the subject, he grabs Suzy's wrist, saying he's busy and asks her to just say what she wants. Blushing, she says Appa again, which leaves the new guy confused. Closing her eyes, she wonders why she said that and remembers that last time she called him Appa, but wasn't referring to him. The protagonist then says he knows that, and from what he recalls, she said that she was talking about Bak Soo-hyuk that day, and he asks if that's the only reason she called him. Grabbing his jacket, she says it's important to her. Not understanding anything, he wonders why it's important and doubts that she's calling him that because she knows his true age. Continuing the conversation, Suzy calls him arrogant and says he probably doesn't realize it because he's new at school, but if her brother says a word, he can mobilize the entire school. She says he doesn't know anything and that she went easy on him because he's handsome, though she doesn't finish the word and just says she won't do that anymore. As she grips tighter, she says that with just one word from her, he'd be dead in an instant. Letting her go, he frees himself, commenting that his clothes are all wrinkled and Suzy is left extremely confused by the new guy's attitude. Very shy, she asks what he's doing and Daejun responds by saying he's handcuffing her. She questions this absurdity, wondering why she can't fight back, and he answers, saying that she won't be able to. Baek asks him to let her go, telling him he's making a mistake, and that if she tells her brother, he'll be dead, but the boy tells her to bring her brother here. Confused, she doesn't react. Calmly looking at her, he says that she keeps talking about her brother and asks her to call him since he wanted to meet Soo-hyuk anyway. Then the girl asks if he's crazy and says he should never meet her brother because he might end up dead. Not understanding, he says that she just threatened him using her brother and Suzy agrees, but says they still can't meet. The protagonist then tells her to call him or he won't let her go, and embarrassed, Baek asks if he plans to handcuff her for the rest of her life and eventually gives in. But she asks him to let her go, saying her wrists hurt and that he should hold her hands instead. Meanwhile, the second-year leader, along with his right-hand man and Park, approach the couple. Park Dojin says that's the transfer student. The bald guy, in turn, asks if that's Bak Suzy, the younger sister of Bak Soo-hyuk, with him. He says it's disturbing to see something so vulgar happening at school and asks what they're doing in the sacred territory of the school. He concludes by saying that the school is for academic knowledge, but before he can finish, Daejun calls him Baldy and asks what he's talking about. Park laughs, and the guy with glasses knows what's coming next. Annoyed, the bald guy asks what he means by that. Daejun says nothing. He recalls a moment in his old job when he told his boss that he was getting white hairs. As he went to pull them out, his boss told him not to touch them because each of his white hairs was precious. Then he calls the new guy a brat and asks if his dad doesn't also have a lot of white hairs on his head. Thinking about it, Daejun says he doesn't know and that he's never seen a white hair before. As his boss walked away, he told him to throw out everything that was to be discarded that day, but Daejun didn't understand, and his boss yelled at him again to throw it all away. Back in the present, the transfer student apologizes for calling Jaeok Baldy and emphasizes that he wasn't mocking his hair loss, but in the end, it doesn't matter. At that moment, Park Dojin starts laughing uncontrollably, shouting that the boy is really funny and that he likes him, unlike his right-hand man who didn't appreciate the situation. After laughing until he cried, the bully explains that Jaeok didn't lose his hair, he chose to shave it, but admits that in the end, he's still bald anyway. Whispering, the guy with glasses tells Dojin that his boss really did choose to shave his head, but at the time he was also dealing with hair loss. Dojin apologizes after hearing this information. Excited by the gossip, Park tells the transfer student that the bald guy did suffer hair loss for a while, all while the bald guy listens, clearly irritated. The second-year student with glasses, waving his arm, says they really are first years and asks them to go somewhere else. Not liking this kind of talk, Daejun asks who he is to decide when they can leave, and Bak Suzy comments that he's Ju Gongmyeon, a second-year student named Jaeok. The leader confirms who he is and tells them to disappear before he stops being merciful. Unfazed by it all, the new guy says he understands, but that, in any case, he arrived at the spot first, so if anyone needs to leave, it's Jaeok. Nervous about the comment, Suzy questions the transfer student, asking if he's crazy. Not believing the boy's audacity, Jaeok asks if he misheard him. With a menacing expression, Park starts laughing again, saying the new guy is insane. The bald guy says he understands what Daejun meant and concludes that in that case, he can do whatever he wants. Looking worried, Suzy takes out her phone and calls someone, addressing them as Appa, asking where they are. Not liking the turn this conversation is taking, the guy with glasses tells Jaeok to calm down, mentioning that Suzy is Bak Soo-hyuk's sister. He notes that she never calls anyone Appa under any circumstances. Realizing that she's actually calling her brother, Suzy confidently smiles and asks him if he's on his way. The two second years just stare at the girl, waiting for what will happen next. Curious, Daejun also asks Suzy if her brother is really coming, and with a calm expression, she says over the phone that she's going to hang up now. On her phone, we can see she really was in a call with a contact saved as Appa. After ending the call, Suzy faces the two, and while holding on to the new guy, asks if they have anything else to say. If not, she can leave and deal with Daejun. Being cautious, the student with glasses tells Jaeok that it would be reckless to hold the two right now, but that doesn't mean they're weak for doing this. There's just no way out of this situation. Completely changing the mood, he waves and smiles, telling Suzy she can go, and to tell her brother he says hello. As an arrogant and assertive girl, she says he can tell her brother that himself and that she doesn't have time to bother with useless people. As they leave, the guy with glasses comments that even though Baek Suzy is a freshman, they can't mess with her because of her older brother, and that's what saved them today. He then asks Jaok if he's okay, and Jaok confirms he is. Completely irritated with a murderous aura, Jaok questions his colleague, asking if he really looks okay, to which the guy replies that Jaok is furious. The bald guy concludes by saying that Dojun really chose a good ally. He says they'll deal with the two later, but Park doesn't accept that his plans have been delayed. Looking at the protagonist, he says he doesn't have time to wait, and that it would be worse to let the new guy get away like this. With the predator's gaze, he says he can't take it anymore and can't let him go like that, and the guy with glasses already notices the bully's strange aura. At that moment, the second-year student asks what Park Dojun is thinking, reminding him that he said to let the two go in peace. Completely ignoring everything said, the bully replies that this is going to be great. He rushes quickly toward the two with a predatory look, saying he wants to see what happens. He's getting closer to them, and they don't seem to have noticed his presence. But Daejun doesn't waste time and senses something. Grabbing Baek Suzy by the waist, he pulls her to the side with force. He catches her by the torso, holding her. He moves her aside, successfully dodging Park Dojun's full-speed attack. While holding Suzy by the waist, he asks what just happened. Noticing that the new guy dodged, Park gets into position again, this time to launch a close-range attack. Gaining momentum and jumping toward the new guy with a terrifying smile on his face, he tries to land a right punch, but Daejun quickly dodges. He twists his torso, this time attempting a punch with the outer part of his left arm, but again he misses. Spinning to the right, he tries another punch, which the protagonist dodges. Daejun prepares for a counterattack with an open hand. He slaps Park directly on the cheek with his palm. Park is stunned by the hit, but within milliseconds, he regains his composure and looks at the protagonist with a grin. He throws another punch from the left, which is dodged. At this moment, Daejun wonders who this bully is, noting that an ordinary person would have passed out from such a powerful slap. Looking behind him, he sees Suzy Baek and thinks that he needs to create some distance first. Jaok's right-hand man runs toward the fight, thinking that Park Dojun has lost control again and that it'll be a problem if Baek Suzy gets caught in the middle of the brawl. Meanwhile, the bully tries another punch from the right, which is dodged again. When he spins and throws a left punch, the new guy blocks it and traps his arm. Deflecting the bully's entire attack, Daejun notices an opening. Park prepares to strike, delivering a direct kick to the protagonist, but Daejun simply blocks it. The force of the kick pushes Park backward, and he questions why the new guy is only defending himself. Exhausted, Daejun just stares at him, thinking the streets are empty. The second-year student with glasses grabs Suzy by the arms, and she tells him to let go because she knows how to take care of herself. Seeing this, the protagonist is pleased, realizing she really can handle herself. Confused, Park questions if the new guy isn't a bit strange and asks what fun there is in just defending during a fight. Ignoring him, the transfer student simply looks to the side. Seeing how Suzy is acting, he thinks there's no problem in focusing on himself until Baek Suhyuk arrives. Stretching as he walks, Park Dojun says he's heard some rumors about the new guy and wants to see if they're true. But before he can finish, Daejun quickly throws a right punch, which Park manages to block just in time. Excited by the fight, Park says the protagonist is really fast. Then he charges in for a counterattack. However, the transfer student is even faster, and before the bully can think, he throws a sidekick, which Park defends. After the kick, both step back. With his arm slightly hurting, Park Dojun is shocked by how strong and fast Daejun truly is. Without giving him a chance to speak, Daejun delivers another kick, this time to the bully's midsection, which Park blocks with his arms. But it's not enough, as the force of the kick sends Park flying backward. Feeling a surge of adrenaline, he stops himself, saying that was brutal and that Daejun is incredibly strong. Adjusting his shirt collar, the new guy asks about Park's arm, wondering if he's okay. Confused, the bully looks at his injured arm and says it's nothing serious. But he notices the injury, and when he removes the bandage, his arm is completely bruised. He immediately remembers a hit he took from one of the veterans and says he thought it would heal. Smiling, Daejun tells him his arm will have to heal. Taking off his jacket, he concludes that Park Dojun is about to take a few more hits now. Shocked, Baek Suzy calls out to Daejun, asking why he's taking off his clothes. He says he's just removing his jacket, and Suzy blushes. Still, she questions how he can undress like that in such a crowded place, but the new guy doesn't understand what she means by crowded. Then, when he turns around, he notices a crowd of students and wonders when they appeared. The girls comment that he's really handsome and hope they don't fight, but one of them mentions that it looks like he's the one who stirs things up. Suspicious, Daejun thinks that he's finally trying to handle this the right way. Park smiles, saying he's glad he felt the new guy's strength, but that he's going to stop for today. He says the next time will be the real deal and that he will meet him again, leaving the protagonist confused. Frustrated, Park Dojun walks away, pushing the girls aside, telling them to get out of his way. One of the girls asks why he's going that way and shoving people when he could go another way, and her friend says he has a powerful energy. The second-year student with glasses comments that it's a shame, but tells the transfer student not to worry because they'll be seeing each other again soon. Adjusting his jacket, the protagonist says the student with glasses has been talking a lot since the beginning and tells him to bring everyone next time too. because it's annoying to fight them one by one. Hearing this, the second-year student becomes furious, calling him a bastard. Unable to control himself, he charges at Daejun, asking how a first year could be so bold to talk like that. But a hand rests on his shoulders, stopping him. It's Jeok telling Ganmyeong to show mercy, and that as a second year, he must control his anger when dealing with a first-year student, and therefore they should back off for now. Feeling embarrassed, Ganmyeong apologizes, saying that thanks to his leader, he managed to control his emotions and that he's still far from being immersed enough in the path. The bald guy also admits he's not good enough yet and says he's so arrogant, he thought he'd never lack mercy. Completely confused, Daejun wonders what these guys are even talking about, while in the background, Baek Suzy calls out to the protagonist. She asks if the new guy has gone crazy, saying those guys are second-year leaders, making the situation dangerous for him. Confident, he asks if she's saying it was dangerous asterisk for those guys asterisk, but correcting him, she says it was dangerous asterisk for him asterisk, though the new guy says he's not afraid. With her hand on her waist and blushing, Baek says she doesn't know if he's unafraid or just overconfident, but even though he's strong, he needs to be careful, because the second and third years are more powerful than he can imagine. As she turns around, she thanks him for what he did, but questions how he could grab her by the waist with so much force. Closing his eyes, he apologizes, saying he didn't imagine that grabbing her waist and holding her tightly would hurt her, and then the girl yells that she'll never count that as a hug. Changing the subject, Daejun asks about her brother, and she admits she lied about him coming because Daejun was being reckless with the second years, so she decided to lie to save him. With her arms crossed, she says he almost got killed by the monk before even meeting her appa, and asks why he wants to meet her brother. At that moment, Daejun imagines hitting Suzy's brother and realizes that saying that in front of his sister might be a bad idea. Before he can finish, Suzy interrupts, saying that the new guy will die if he meets her brother, and not to worry her, quickly adding that she doesn't care about the protagonist. Concerned, she tells him not to think about her brother and to focus on handling the first-year issues, because aside from Park Dojin, there's also an alliance trying to get him too. As she walks away, she says she saved him in the end, so now no one owes anyone anything, and also tells the new guy not to follow her. He says he won't. Still a bit shocked by all of this, the protagonist wonders what's up with that girl, thinking she came to threaten him but ended up saving him and worrying about him. As she walks away, blushing, the girl starts thinking about how reckless and annoying he is, making her worry so much, but immediately wonders why she's so concerned about that guy. Sometime later in room 4, Park Dojin enters, asking a student if Kim Do-yeon hasn't shown up, and his friend replies that it's obvious he's not going to, then asks about Park's arm. Questioning the bully about his arm, Park responds that it'll take a few days to fully heal. Smiling, he says he likes the new student and that he's not very strong but could still beat him. As he sits down, he says he needs to collect as much money as possible and that he needs to find Kim Do-yeon as soon as possible. Then he calls for the class president, telling him to run, and the student does. The bully asks if the president knows Kim Do-yeon's address, and the president confirms that he does, so Park asks for the address. He tells the student to collect the money within the week, leaving the class president shocked. Scared, his friend puts a hand on his shoulder, saying it's only due next week, and if the bully gets caught changing things without proper permission, he's going to be in trouble. Calmly, Park says that's exactly why he's giving them this extra week to collect it, and that nothing will happen if he's caught because he's not afraid at all. Then the class president calls out to the bully, saying they can't just do things however they want. He concludes by stating that he knows the rules, but Park interrupts him, asking him to play rock, paper, scissors. He insists and they play. The bully throws scissors, while the student throws rock. Park says he lost and calls for another round. This time, Park throws scissors again, and the student throws paper. Park says he won, and the class president was about to mention how strange it is to decide on the collected money with this game. But the bully interrupts, talking about a finger flick and positioning his middle finger near the student's face. He clarifies that the game wasn't to decide on the collection, but rather it was a finger flick game, and he tells the president to move closer. Obeying, the president moves his head toward the bully's hand. Park places the palm of his hand on the student's face, saying it's now charged. In the background, a classmate asks why Park is bending his finger that way, wondering if his friend is actually a mollusk because of how flexible he is. Suddenly, Park releases his finger with full force, flicking it onto the student's face. All of his classmates are shocked by what they see. With a throbbing forehead, the class president tries to hold back his tears. Lying on the floor, he sees Park Dojin's hand again. Looking menacingly, the bully says he's going to throw scissors again. He challenges the president to another round. At the same time, the protagonist is walking through the school, saying that in the end he couldn't find Baek Soo-hyuk. It would have been easier to deal with the second-year students, but now he has to find Baek Soo's brother to solve the whole issue involving the money collection. He also recalls Park Dojin, whom he faced earlier, and how Park managed to withstand his slap. Thinking that Park isn't like the other guys he's faced so far because Park has an exceptionally strong physique, which can be seen just by looking at the thickness of his neck. But no matter how big Park is, what's really surprising is his endurance. Or perhaps Daejun is just rusty, which is another possibility he considers. He reflects on not having handled things correctly because he's been resting for a while, but now he feels this has been good for shaking off the rust. As he cracks his knuckles, he's excited at the thought of being able to beat up Park Dojin until he can't take it anymore. Later that evening, on a dark street, a student is walking alone. It's Kim Do-yeon, who's trying to call someone but can't get through. He wonders why the person isn't answering, calling them a fraud, saying they promised to make Park kneel in front of him and apologize, but it was all a lie. He laments that now he can't even go to school and looks for someone else to help him. He recalls a conversation at school where a student talks about how amazing the new guy is and that because of him, the whole atmosphere in their class has improved. The student mentions that the bullies from his class don't even show up at school anymore, and another student says that in his class, the bullies still come, but now they're like dead rats. Hearing this, Kim wonders if the new guy is really that strong and questions whether his situation would improve if Daejun took over his class. Back in the present, he considers the idea of giving the money to the new student to beat up Park Dojin. He thinks it's a great plan and that Park Dojin will be finished. Appearing suddenly out of the darkness, the bully asks if Kim was talking about him. Completely terrified, Kim asks why Park is there. But immediately, Park slaps him across the face. Pushing him, Park tells him to start running, saying that now they're heading to the final destination, but Kim screams the bully's name, begging him to wait just a minute. At that moment, Park stops what he's doing. He says it's a good thing he hit the brakes, and Kim admits he made a mistake. With a terrifying look, the bully asks if this is fun for him, saying it seems like Kim is at an amusement park. Seeing the student crying, Park asks why he's crying and whether it's because he's having so much fun. Kim looks at the bully, who tells him to do it again. The next day at school, in the classroom, someone is saying that this is the result of the efforts of many mathematicians. It's a math problem, and one student says he's not good with numbers, while another says he'll explain again. The student explaining is Manhwa, who says that every weapon follows the same principle. You have to calculate both the weight and the distance, and especially the angle. Excited, the blonde student asks if now he can slowly use the bat, but Minho replies that there's an order to everything and he'll need to know the formula first. Meanwhile, in another corner of the room, Yang Jinmo is celebrating his victory in the English quiz against Daejun. A girl in the group leans on his shoulder and says she gave him a hint, but the new guy responds that he didn't see any hint. Blushing, she says the hint was about the place where he promised to do jujitsu with her, and confused, he says the word was bed, not understanding what she meant. Minsu is thinking about the fact that the protagonist claimed to have been studying, but in the end he lost to Yang in an elementary school quiz and wonders what Daejun has been doing all this time. Yang tells the new guy to study more, and Daejun presses his forehead, telling him not to get cocky and to take off his glasses and do it again. Curious, Minho asks why Yang came to their classroom to do a quiz, but Daejun wonders if they're getting too close. And after that, the blonde asks if Minho is jealous. Minho then suggests they should study too, but Hojong notices someone coming. It's Park Dojin, the leader of Room 4. Looking serious, Minho asks why Park is there, and Hojong, surprised, wonders if he's there to pick a fight. At that moment, the girl gets serious and thinks that Park Dojin is known to be very reckless. When Park arrives at the group, he says he wants to talk to the new student, but complains there's no chair available. Looking at Yang Jinmo, he tells him to get up. Annoyed, Park tells him not to frustrate him and to move out of the way. Looking at his group of friends, Yang knows he would lose to the bully, but if he obeys the order, he'll be labeled a loser. Reflecting on how he's built his reputation with great effort, he realizes he can't back down so easily. Defying the bully, Yang asks Park why he should move. The blonde gets excited, saying Yang is really brave and acts like Daejun won't come to save him. Park just gives a wide smile, getting ready to hit the student who dared to challenge him. Sweating in fear, Jinmo shouts that he's not afraid of him and that his reflexes are really good. Laughing at the situation, Park says he wasn't going to hit him, he just wanted to play rock, paper, scissors. Relieved and embarrassed, Jinmo laughs, thinking he's safe since it's just a game. They play and Park picks scissors while Yang Jinmo picks paper, so he loses. Smiling with his eyes closed, Jinmo says he lost and because of that will step aside so the bully can talk to the new student. Happy he wasn't cowardly or beaten, Jinmo thinks he's lucky to get away, believing he's only moving because he lost the game. As Jinmo starts to walk away, Park places a hand on his shoulder. Yang turns around only to be slapped hard across the face by Park Dojin, who shouts that he has to receive his punishment for losing. The force of the slap sends Yang Jinmo flying. The blonde says that it hurt him both physically and mentally, while Minho remarks that Park is really strong. After that, the bully pulls up a chair. Sitting down, he tells the protagonist that he said he would come back, and Daejun asks if he wants to fight, apologizing because he needs to finish an English quiz right now. Park says it's fine and that he needs a break too, but since they're going to fight, he adds that there's a condition for the fight. They'll play a game called Asterisk Bafo Asterisk, which involves hitting a coin on top of a book. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the student with glasses asks another student if the academy has contacted him. The student named Sungwei says they can do it in an abandoned auditorium, but the student with glasses says they don't need to speak formally when they're alone. However, Sungwei insists on following the school hierarchy. The student with glasses tells him to stop pretending to sit in an invisible chair, and Samwa responds that he's doing it because he's worried about losing muscle mass. Continuing the conversation, the student with glasses asks Samwa if he saw the new student fight in person and what he thought of his abilities. Samwa responds that the new guy overpowered Sim Sangbo, so he's definitely talented, but he suspects that he's hiding his true abilities, saying that he moves like someone with talent, but that his posture isn't clear and he doesn't keep his guard up. The second-year student then asks about Dojin. Samwa says Dojin is an interesting person and that he bulldozes everything with his physical strength. He explains that Dojin is labeled as PF, which stands for Person of Strength, and that he possesses a unique strength only he has. Recalling the past, Samwa asks Dojin what he's doing, and Dojin responds that he's stretching. Flexibility equals elasticity, and it's this elasticity that gives the bully Park Dojin his great resilience. Opening the window, Park says they'll see each other tomorrow, and Samwa asks where he's going, noting that they're on the second floor. It's this ability of Park's that allows him to instinctively avoid a lot of damage. Back to the present, Samwa tells the second-year student that the result is that Park Dojin relies heavily on his physicality and has little technique, not to mention his explosive personality. He concludes that all of this affects Park from time to time, and the second-year student remarks that Dojin is a gamble and asks if you should trust him. Samwa replies that he doesn't know the answer but asks if the second year can imagine that Park Dojin, who has no technique, started going to the gym and defeated all the members using just his physical strength. He wonders if it's even possible for someone as incredible as him to lose. Back to the present, Park is frustrated for losing his game to Daejan and says he's been losing a lot these days. He asks if the protagonist took private lessons for Bafo to be so good, and the new guy, in disbelief, asks if he's seriously asking that. Looking at his hand, Daejan thinks his body still remembers how to play, but that Park is terrible at it and wonders what kind of bets the bully is making. Annoyed by always losing, Dojin invites him to play another round. In response, Daejan says enough, questioning how many games they've played already, and says they'll just pretend Dojin won, which leaves him confused. Daejan says he'll accept the conditions Park mentioned earlier, and at this, Dojin gets irritated. But he stops, thinking about some kind of plan, realizing that now isn't the time to decide the winner. Accepting the proposal, Park tells the new guy that he can't complain later and says the fight will be on Friday at the place he marked. Not caring, the protagonist just tells the bully to take care of his arm because he hates seeing him push through the pain. Minho stands up, telling Daejan to wait a moment. Placing his hands on the table, Minho says he doesn't understand why the new guy accepted defeat but questions if he really needs to accept Park's offer. Daejan responds that he should be grateful Park set up the ring for the fight. Annoyed, Minho says it's suspicious that Park wants to fight in front of the second years, and the new guy asks if it's really that suspicious. Park Dojin says the fight will be at the gym following the official rules, mentioning that he invited the second years to watch and that he doesn't fight dirty like someone else. Confused, Minho asks who he's talking about, and the blonde, knowing the answer, just says he doesn't know either. Happy with the proposal, Daejan says he doesn't know what the bully is planning, but tells him to bring the two bald guys along as well. With a strange look, Park says he likes the new guy for being so crazy and confirms the match. With his arms crossed, the protagonist thinks that after dealing with Park, it's time to handle the second years as well to resolve the first year money collection issue. Afterward, he asks if Yang Jimmo is okay and invites him to sit down, suggesting they play another quiz, but Jimmo is crying, wishing the world would end right then. Then Kim sees his bully leave the room. Hearing everything, he wonders if the new student's name is Kim Daekwon. Arriving at the new guy's classroom, he asks for permission to enter and asks if his name is Kim Daekwon, but Daejan has no idea what he's talking about. The girl clarifies that his name is actually Kwon Daejan, and the boy apologizes, saying he has a request to make. He starts to gather the courage to make his request. With his eyes closed, he begs Daejan to beat up Park Dojin, but to lose in the end. Confused, Daejan doesn't understand what he means. Annoyed, the girl tells him to explain himself properly and not to show up acting weird out of nowhere. Kim concludes by saying that you should at least know the name of the person he's asking a favor from and that you should explain things clearly. Kim begins to explain, saying that Park Dojin has a hidden motivation called Todo, which is a betting sport, and that this also applies to the second-year students who bet on the fight between Park and Daejan. Furthermore, there's also a reason why the new student has to lose. Curious, the new student asks what that reason might be because he's not confident that he'll lose. He insists on knowing the reason, and Kim struggles to explain. Flashing back to that night, while Park has a weak student in a leg lock, he's looking at his phone, saying that the student must have drooled with excitement at the thought of his bully kneeling and apologizing. He tightens his grip, asking how much the student paid the veterans. With great difficulty, the student replies that it was 500. Happy to hear that, the bully says his balance is now 500 and demands the student hand over that amount, adding that they'll also take money from the 3 pigs. Sometime later in a building, Park notices the place is closed at the moment. Frustrated, he asks about his 500,000 won, and Kim in the background is also irritated, thinking that the money is his, not the bully's. But Dojin notices something different. He sees that it belongs to Hyun and says he needs to borrow some money. He tells Kim that this will be done in Kim's name, and Kim asks if this isn't loan sharking. Hugging him, Park confirms that it is but reassures him, saying that he'll pay it back soon, explaining that he'll fight the new student for money, and that if he wins, it'll be like hitting the lottery. He says he'll be the winner and will soon return the money after his victory in the fight. Pressuring Kim, he tells him to hurry up and make the call. Back in the present, Kim explains that this is why the new student needs to lose, because otherwise, Kim won't get his money back. The girl then questions if Kim still wants the new student to beat Park Dojin, and he responds by saying yes. With a sweet smile, the girl asks if she can break Kim's neck if he wins, wondering if he's trying to die. Rushing toward Kim, the girl screams that he needs to say something that makes sense, while Minho holds her back, calling for Hojong's help. Then Daejun asks what Kim will offer in return for him beating up Park. Kim thought he would do it for free, but the new guy asks if Kim is good at English, to which Kim responds that he's really good. The new student says that's great, adding that there's no way he'll lose to Park, but he will beat him up, and suggests they meet after class. Kim, shocked, asks if Daejun is going to beat him up. The protagonist reassures him, saying that he just needs to have an English vocabulary match with Yan, who's lying on the floor, and that's why he needs Kim's help. Blushing, the girl offers to teach him English instead, but the new guy just stares at her while sweating and stuttering, trying to say something. Telling Kim that they'll start today, the boy, now a little happy, agrees. Deep in thought, Daejun considers that beating up Park Dojin isn't a big deal, but he decides that it would be crossing the line if he interferes with things happening outside the school. After some time, the day comes to an end with a beautiful sunset. In a part of the city, someone calls out to Daejun, who responds by asking what's up. It's Kim, who's walking with the protagonist, and he comments that the new guy seems very confident about beating up the bully Park Dojin. He then asks why Daejun doesn't bet money like Park Dojin does, and while this happens, Daejun is reading a book saying that Da means money. Kim replies that he can't bet because he's a failure, but that Daejun can. Not understanding, the protagonist just says that he doesn't have any money. Changing the subject, Kim says it's a coincidence they arrived at this place during their walk, explaining that this is the establishment where Dojin and he borrow money, which leaves Daejun in silence. Taking off his glasses, the new student asks if this is why Kim has been teaching him while they walked, and Kim says there's a brain activation effect when walking, but the new guy says that's enough. Looking up, Daejun asks if Kim wants him to go in and borrow some money from the place. With a bit of fear, he says he doesn't need to do that, but the new student says he won't hit him, so Kim admits that he did want him to get the money after all. Showing a card that reads Daein Ilsu, the protagonist says this looks like gangster stuff. However, he says it doesn't change anything, and looking seriously, tells Kim he'll go in alone so the student can leave. Sometime later on the same late afternoon, someone asks if he managed to get some cash. Doing pull-ups, Park says yes, and that Kim ended up helping in the end, and they got Ilsu's number. Besides that, they collected the money in advance, so the bully has enough money for now but doesn't want to waste time, wanting to withdraw it and invest in crypto. One of his friends asks if he'll be okay, since he broke the rules and also borrowed money from Ilsu. Not worrying about any of that, the bully says that with high risk comes high reward. Exerting a lot of strength, he pulls himself above the bar, flexing his forearm while smiling. He questions if all he needs to do is just pull up. At the same time, Daejun wonders if there's no one there and whether he should go back now. A man in a black coat and wearing a watch asks what happened if he's there to borrow some money. Irritated, the man curses some people and says he told them not to leave the office, and then the new student asks him to wait a minute. Looking back, the man asks if the young man isn't actually a student, mentioning that lately students have been coming to borrow money. Opening the door, he says the boy can come in and that it's getting late. Sitting in the armchair, he asks how much the student needs. But first, he comments that he needs to know his age, which leaves the new guy unsettled. Getting nervous, he first says he's 17 years old, then changes it to 20, and in his thoughts, he realizes he's messed up. Irritated, the man asks what he's talking about and questions if the kid thinks this place is a joke. Feigning an absurd excuse, the protagonist starts to get up, saying he forgot the clothes on the line and that he'll come back next time. The man tells him to stop right there and says he doesn't care about the clothes on the line. He mentions that it's not raining since the weather is good and questions why he's saying that, telling him he needs to use his brain to come up with better excuses. Saying this is kind of suspicious, he concludes by asking who the student is, which leaves the new guy silent and sweating. The protagonist just ignores him at this moment. Standing up, he turns around, saying he'll leave it for another time. At that moment, the man grabs him firmly by the arm. Cursing the student, he says he's very impatient because he didn't even let him finish talking and asks where he's going. Irritated, the loan shark says the student isn't fooling him and asks which gang he belongs to. While he was asking why the student appeared, Daejun grabs his hand and starts hurting him, causing the man to scream in pain, begging him to let go. With an annoyed look, the protagonist simply says that's why he chose to leave it for another time and states he's leaving now. He says he'll release him and asks the man not to follow him afterward. In a moment of fury, the lone shark grabs his ashtray, which was still lit, preparing to strike the new student with it. But before he can do anything, Daejun takes the ashtray from his hand, tossing it aside, then finishing with a karat chop directly on top of the man's head. The blow was so strong that it deformed his head instantly, throwing him back into the armchair due to the impact of the powerful strike he received. Standing next to the man, the protagonist realizes he retaliated without even noticing, and that because of this, he's in trouble. As he leaves, he says that apparently he'll need to come back next time, but before finishing the sentence, he realizes that now that the lone shark has fainted, it's the right moment to check his records. Flipping through the records, he finds Kim Do-yeon's name and wonders if tearing out the page from the record would solve it. However, the protagonist notices something while flipping through the documents. Seeing a photo of an adult man playing golf, he realizes it's his principal and wonders why there's a picture of him in such a place. Looking back, he notices someone coming, talking about having eaten the best spicy pork, and the new guy thinks he's in trouble now. Walking quickly, he thinks the best option is to get out of that place as soon as possible. But that person opens the door and comes face to face with a student. The man asks who he is and how he managed to get into that place. Looking back, sweating nervously, Daejun says that their Hyunnim has arrived and mentions that the gentleman must be sleeping now. Leaving through the front door, he says he's finished his business for now and so he's leaving. As he leaves the room, one of the men comments that yesterday several high school guys also came and starts trying to wake up the gentleman. They start shouting, frantically trying to wake him up while the protagonist holds his backpack and looks sideways, waiting to see how this ends. Then one of the men comes out shouting about who that bastard is and tells them to catch him. But at that moment, Daejun is already running. At dusk, inside a wooded park. Sitting on the park bench, the new student is very tired, thinking he shouldn't have gone poking a hornet's nest and wonders if they won't come after him. Raising his hand, he says the weather is really not good, and that it's not going to rain either, so he shouldn't have mentioned the clothes on the line. Putting his hand in his pocket, he considers asking director Lee about the photo of the president, but ends up letting it go and focuses on defeating Park Do-jin first. Taking his cell phone to check the weather, he remembers that the bully's scheduled for Friday but realizes it's supposed to rain that day. Looking at his phone, he says a rainy day on that day is not something he likes at all. After a few days, already on Friday on a rainy night, finally the day has arrived to decide everything between the bully Do-jin and the newcomer Daejun. One of Park's colleagues asks him if his arm has improved, and he says he's fine despite not having gone to the hospital to check. Raising his arm, he just says he's feeling some twinges in his arm. But clenching his fist, he says that the new student's attack ended up being nothing and that there's no one who can hurt him. At that moment, his blonde biker friend arrives. The bully asks if everyone is present and says it's time to go in now. Entering the chosen place, the blonde is impressed with the setting, and one of his colleagues asks if it's his first time there, but Park says it's an unused school auditorium that nobody uses. Heading toward the door, he says that a crazy guy who gets into fights has been using this same place to play around for some time. Looking at Park, one of the leaders says he arrived early, commenting that they are in the middle of preparations and all the students in the background are cleaning and organizing the ring. Looking back, Park says that the fight atmosphere is serious and calls Do-yeon for sparring instead of the coin-flipping game, but he ends up refusing. While stretching, the bully says it was a joke and that he never imagined fighting in this environment and asks if the seniors haven't arrived yet. But one of the leaders says they arrived just in time, saying that everyone is present now and the students are shocked to see your presence. It's the Path Gang, which is a group of second-year students led by the bald jock. That the first-year students bow, saying they are friends of Park Do-jin, and one of them comments that the aura of this group is incredible. At that moment, the bald guy looks suspicious because he notices something strange in the environment. He says that the blonde's hair is filled with anguish, and that it's also dyed, and the student says he'll cut it. Going over to Kim, he asks the student if he's also following the path, but the student says he doesn't know, and Jaok simply says he's doing well. Then one of them says they prepared a table on the platform for Jaok, and he says that he always ends up owing him one. Looking back, the bald guy wonders if the new student hasn't shown up yet at the fight location, and that he doesn't want to test his patience today. Several people are walking in the rain, holding their umbrellas. It's the protagonist's group. He says they don't need to keep following him, but the blonde says they need to stay together, and Minho warns that there are several second-year students there. Minho also says that he should know his group will always have his back, and Daejun asks what he's carrying in his backpack. Very confidently, Minho says that his opponent has a numerical advantage and that he prepared more than usual, but his leader tells him to drop all of it. Excited, the blonde says he got information about Park Do-jin and how to attack him, but Daejun says he already figured it all out while playing coin games with him. The blonde is confused about the coin games and Hojong thinks he misheard, while Daejun looks angrily at his phone because something happened. He apologizes and says that apparently his colleagues will need to go ahead without him, and concludes that he'll join them shortly. Back at the school auditorium, the first years from the protagonist's class are facing Jaok. The bald guy understands that the student didn't come, and that his group asked to wait for the new guy without any guarantee, only on the word that he'll arrive soon. Being arrogant, Park asks if he ran away because he's afraid of him, and Minho says he's not that kind of man. The second-year student with glasses realizes that the red-haired student is Minho and says they have no choice but to wait, so he tells the first years they can sit as they like. Relieved, the blonde sits down saying that Minho's Hyung saved them this time and that this path gang has some kind of overwhelming aura and that all 5 main executives are present. They are the third second-year student named Oh Jaegil, the fourth second-year Yu Sang-soo, and the fifth named Kim Samuel. In shock, he comments that the only second-years present are from the path gang and that they are entering the auditorium. Then several people arrive who are titled as a group called the Gang of Righteous Bonds. This is Makisiaka, the second year and leader of this gang, who in turn comments that this is a fight between freshmen and asks why they are organizing all of this. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.